never misses a chance to say something mean or bother me. Staying home might be a problem, I said back, but my mother-in-law just laughed like she was making fun of me. Is it a problem for you? Just think of it as punishment for not doing what I say. Then she hung up. It's not a problem for me, it's a problem for you guys, right? My name is Jessica, and I'm 30 years old. I do housework and work part-time at the local supermarket. It's been 3 years since I married my husband, Mike, who used to work with me. Even though we worked in different parts of the company, we talked a lot before we started dating. What really brought Mike and me closer together was a party at the end of the year at our office. It was a big gathering with people from different departments. Luckily, I ended up sitting next to Mike. Since we were already friends, we talked easily. At one point, Mike had to leave for the restroom and I was left alone. That's when a boss from another department, who had been drinking a lot, started bothering me, trying to get me to drink more. I didn't know what to do because he was a boss I didn't know well. Just when I was feeling uncomfortable, Mike came back. He saw what was happening and calmly took the boss away to another table. When Mike came back to our table, he asked if I was okay and joked about how the boss couldn't handle his alcohol. That's when I started seeing Mike in a new way, and I confessed that I had feelings for him. That's how our relationship started. Things went smoothly from there, and we got married 3 years ago. Even though we don't have kids yet, our marriage is strong and happy. Even though Mike and I are happily married, there's one big problem. My mother-in-law, who we're currently living with, when we first got married, we had our own apartment, but there was a fire in the building next to ours, and our place got flooded with water from the firefighting efforts. We had to leave because our apartment wasn't safe to live in anymore. We didn't know where to go, but Mike's mom offered for us to stay with them. We were thankful for the help and moved in with them. But things got difficult after we moved in. My mother-in-law, who already made mean comments sometimes because she loves Mike a lot, started nagging me more often. One weekend, for example, I had finished all the chores and was relaxing with a cup of coffee in the living room. When my mother-in-law came home, she started bustling around the house. Then she came up to me and said, "Jessica, you're not cleaning properly. You need to spend more time on it and be thankful for your hard-working husband. As his wife, it's your job to support him. I can't believe you can't even do that much. If you're not happy, then you should leave right now." Honestly, I felt frustrated thinking, here we go again. My mother-in-law constantly criticized me, and it seemed like it happened almost every day. I figured the only reason she agreed to let us stay with them was because she wanted to be close to her son, Mike, again. My presence as his wife probably just annoyed her. "Mom, please don't be so hard on Jessica," Mike stepped in. "But there's some truth to what you're saying. Even though she works part-time, she shouldn't slack off on chores." Mike often took his mom's side, which sometimes made me wish he'd support me more as his wife. I never meant to neglect the housework. Even though I work 4 days a week, I always make sure to take care of our home and family of 4, even when I'm not feeling well. On the other hand, my mother-in-law, who's a homemaker, spends most of her time going out and having fun. Since we live in her house, I couldn't complain openly. I just try to be patient in this uncomfortable situation. Then one day, something unexpected happened. Mike suggested that we go on a trip, just the two of us. "Why don't we go to a spa resort next month? The busy season at work is over and I need to use up some of my annual leave. I thought it would be nice for us to relax somewhere." A spa sounds amazing. "I haven't scheduled any work shifts for next month yet, so I can take time off," I told Mike. After talking it over, we decided to go on a 2-day spa trip in the middle of next month. Since we planned to go during the week, we expected to have a peaceful and unhurried time together. I was thrilled about the trip and couldn't contain my excitement. Whenever I had a moment, I found myself researching our destination. Just as I was getting ready to book our stay, my mother-in-law said something surprising. "Jessica, I heard you and Mike are going on a trip. Why didn't you tell me?" she asked. Well, I stuttered, worried about how she might react. Then she said exactly what I feared she would. "Next month is my husband's and my anniversary. I was thinking of celebrating with a family trip. A fancy hotel would be nice." I really didn't want to go on a trip with my mother-in-law. Mike and I were planning on going by ourselves this time. "How about we all go together next time?" I suggested, hoping to compromise. But my mother-in-law wasn't having it. "It won't be the same if it's not this time. It's our anniversary celebration." Just as I was about to respond, Mike walked in from work. "Welcome home, Mike. We were just talking about the trip," my mother-in-law said enthusiastically. "Oh, I'm excited," Mike said, seeming to agree with his mom. I wondered how she found out about the trip, but it seemed like Mike might have told her. Mike noticed my look and seemed a bit uneasy. "Mom's really excited, so let's postpone our trip for another time. It'll be more fun if we all go together," Mike suggested. With Mike and his dad agreeing, I couldn't refuse going on the trip with all of us. "Okay, next time it'll just be us, I promise," Mike said, looking relieved when I reluctantly agreed. Even though I wasn't happy about how the trip turned out, there wasn't much I could do about it now. At least I decided I'd be the one to pick the places we visit and the food we try. So I took charge of booking hotels and planning our sightseeing. Then came the day of the trip. I had packed everything the day before, so the plan was to wake up an hour before leaving, enjoy breakfast, and then head out. When my alarm went off, I stretched and called out for Mike, noticing he wasn't beside me. Then it hit me, he wasn't anywhere in the house. Could it be? I dialed Mike's cell phone, but there was no answer. When I called my mother-in-law's phone, she picked up right away. "Oh, Jessica dear, what's up? Mike can't talk right now because he's driving." "Where are you guys?" I asked, feeling a sinking sensation. My mother-in-law responded casually, "Isn't it obvious? We're on a family vacation. It wouldn't be a proper family trip with an outsider like you, so you'll have to stay home. Maybe we'll bring you back a souvenir if we remember." I could hear the triumph in her voice. "Stay at home? That's going to be a problem," I told my mother-in-law, but she just laughed mockingly. "Oh, is it a problem for you? Just see it as punishment for not doing what I say." Then she hung up abruptly. I covered my face with my hands and shook my shoulders, but instead of crying, I burst out laughing. Well, they better enjoy their trip. They'll regret leaving me behind. I quickly went online and booked a nice hotel in the tourist spot we were supposed to visit today. Then I made a reservation at a restaurant where I could enjoy a delicious dinner, just for myself. After quickly getting ready and having breakfast, I felt ready to have some fun. "All right, time for a good time," I said to myself as I grabbed my luggage and hopped on the train. I had done a lot of research on different tourist spots, and I was determined to have a vacation. It's a small tourist spot, so I might bump into Mike and my in-laws, but I don't care. They're the ones who messed up. I thought as the train approached our destination. From now on, I'm going to forget about my mother-in-law and Mike and just enjoy myself, I decided as I stepped off the train. I visited a cute boutique, had tea at a trendy cafe, and chatted with locals, thoroughly enjoying my solo adventure. As the day turned into night, it was time to check into the hotel I had booked, one of the top luxury hotels in the area. I felt like I needed to do something drastic like this to rejuvenate myself. As I walked towards the hotel's check-in counter, I heard a woman's voice causing a scene. "Why can't we stay here? We're willing to pay." When I looked closer, I realized it was my mother-in-law causing the disturbance. Of course, they wouldn't be allowed to stay there because this wasn't the hotel I had booked for the four of us. From a safe distance, I saw Mike spotting me and calling out, "Hey, Jessica, what's going on? We couldn't stay at the hotel you booked, so we have to find another one, but they're full." He came towards me, looking a bit angry, followed by my mother-in-law who seemed furious. Well, that's what happens when the person who booked the hotel isn't here to check in. It's a security rule. "I did warn you," I said calmly. At that moment, they seemed to realize their mistake and exchanged surprised glances. Just as they were about to cause more trouble, hotel staff rushed over. It was quite funny to watch my mother-in-law being escorted out of the hotel, gently but firmly, by the staff. "Remember this, we will stay in a place far more luxurious than this hotel," my mother-in-law exclaimed before she and Mike left. Feeling somewhat relieved, I proceeded with my check-in, leaving them without accommodation. Once I completed the check-in process, I was shown to my room. The clean and luxurious decor made me feel like I was in a dream. After settling my luggage, I decided to explore the hotel. After wandering around for a bit, I returned to the lobby. More guests were arriving. I sat on the sofa and zoned out for a while when two young women sat down next to me. They seemed excited, chatting about their impressions of the hotel. Their conversation quickly turned interesting. "Hey, did you hear about that hotel near the station? There's a really creepy rumor about it." They say if you stay in a second-floor room, you start hearing things that aren't there, and your stuff gets stolen. And even worse, there was a case where someone died, and nobody knows who did it. We're so lucky we're staying here, right? Do you think it's true? But why hasn't anyone been arrested? I mean, wouldn't you call the police if something like that happened? Well, there are rumors that even the hotel staff might be involved. It's so scary. What a dangerous place. When I checked the time, I realized it was almost time for my dinner reservation. I quickly got up and hurried to the restaurant. The meal was so satisfying. After dinner, I returned to the hotel, took a relaxing bath, changed into my pajamas, and settled in to watch TV. That's when my phone rang. Hello. We found a hotel to stay in, and it's really nice. It's a shame you're not here with us. But don't worry, we'll enjoy it twice as much for you, my mother-in-law said cheerfully. Oh, is that so? Well, you're lucky to find a place at the last minute, I replied casually. Isn't it? It's quiet and relaxing here because there aren't many other guests around. Plus, it's so close to the tourist spot, and the hotel is gorgeous. I wonder why that is, my mother-in-law went on. That's when it hit me. Could it be the hotel near the station? Yes, that's the one. Why do you ask? She responded. I remembered the unsettling story I had heard about the hotel's bad reputation in the lobby before dinner. I think you should leave, I warned my mother-in-law. But she just laughed off my concern. Are you jealous that we found a nice place to stay? Well then, too bad for you. Bye. Once again, my mother-in-law ended the call without giving me a chance to respond. I didn't bother calling her back. I had given my advice, and that was enough. I switched off my phone. I didn't want my relaxation to be interrupted any further. I spent the rest of the evening leisurely and drifted off into a peaceful sleep. The next day, after checking out of the hotel, I visited the tourist spots I had missed the day before. I returned home as the sun was setting, feeling content. As I approached the house, I noticed light leaking out from the windows, indicating that the three of them had already returned home. I'm back. I announced my arrival in my usual tone as I opened the door. As I entered the living room, all three of them started talking at once, creating a commotion. I was taken aback but managed to calm them down. Then my mother-in-law began recounting the incident from the previous night. After they had all gone to bed, they heard sounds of wrestling and someone entering the room. Paralyzed with fear, my mother-in-law stayed in bed quietly while the intruder seemed to roam around the room for about 10 minutes before leaving without a sound. Feeling relieved, my mother-in-law eventually fell back asleep, only to wake up the next morning to find that all their belongings, including wallets and smartphones that were left on the desk, were gone. The only things left were the coin pouch and key holder that Mike had kept in his jacket's inside pocket. In a panic, they rushed to inform the hotel staff, only to be told, "You still need to pay for the room." Shockingly, the hotel staff didn't even call the police. Feeling helpless, the troubled trio used a coins mic to make a call from a public phone to a nearby relative, pleading for help. Luckily, the relatives arrived swiftly, covering the hotel charges and arranging for their safe return home. They promised to report the incident to the police soon. However, their frustration turned towards me. If only you had warned us more seriously to leave, we wouldn't have ended up in this mess, my mother-in-law scolded. That's right, Jessica, you bear some responsibility for this incident. What are you going to do about it? Mike added, joining in with his mother's scolding. But if my in-laws hadn't left me behind to go on their trip, none of this would have happened in the first place. I did warn you, didn't I? I responded honestly. Mike's face went pale. Shut up. You're just the wife. Don't get cheeky. We're getting a divorce. I can't put up with you anymore. I was stunned into silence. I quietly went to our bedroom, retrieved something from the cabinet, and returned to the living room to show it to Mike. Divorce? Fine by me. I don't need a husband who won't stand up for his mistreated wife, I declared firmly. Mike's face went pale. What I had brought out were the divorce papers I had asked a lawyer to prepare. I had been getting ready for this possibility. Maybe we should take some time to think about it, Mike stammered, but my mother-in-law saw an opportunity to push Mike towards the divorce. You should just get rid of such a terrible wife now. Your mom will find you someone better, she urged. Unable to go against his mother's wishes, Mike eventually agreed to the divorce. Well then, goodbye. Please enjoy your life with your beloved family, he said, breaking down. Ignoring Mike's emotional state, I left the house. Later, through my lawyer, I submitted the divorce papers, and the divorce was finalized. Despite Mike's attempts to reconcile, I ignored them all. Meanwhile, my mother-in-law, who had succeeded in getting rid of me, seemed happy for a while, but her joy didn't last long. The news of the divorce and the end of their living together spread throughout the neighborhood, and people who enjoyed gossiping quickly connected it to my mother-in-law's mistreatment of me, revealing her unpleasant nature. She began to face judgmental stares from those around her, and it seemed that finding a new wife for Mike was no longer a priority. I returned to my hometown and was able to find a new job thanks to a friend's recommendation. After everything I've been through, I have my fill of marriage for now. I plan to enjoy being single for a while.
I didn't care if it was a dream or a hallucination. I clung to him and cried and cried. Thomas began to tell me the real story of what had happened and how Charles had lied. Determined to regain our freedom, we resolved to fight. My name is Amelia. I'm 30 years old. I lost my parents in an accident when I was young and grew up in foster care. Without family or anyone to rely on, I lived a life of solitude. Meeting Thomas was something truly special for me. Being in a foster home, it must have been tough. Life is unfair, isn't it? The kindest people seem to suffer the most. We met by chance through work, and soon after, we started dating. We quickly realized how much we understood each other, and not long after, we got married. We didn't have a wedding, just a photo shoot and a small celebration between us. I could finally be happy. I believed so without any doubt. Thomas's parents had divorced when he was young. He was raised by his single mother, who was gentle and kind-hearted. His mother passed away 5 years ago. She had been ill for a long time before she passed. Mom remarried 3 years before she died, so now, my only family is my second father. Not that I'm happy about it. Thomas has a sad expression on his face. Thomas always had a gloomy look on his face when he talked about his stepfather. And it was no surprise because his stepfather, Charles, was a nasty piece of work. Even though he is in his 50s and still jobless, he wasted his days away with alcohol and gambling. Charles was the kind of man who, even when we were getting married, tried to impose his own ridiculous conditions. Amelia, when you get married, you're going to live here with me. It's a woman's job to cook and clean, isn't it? Dad, hold on. Amelia and I already planned to get an apartment and live on our own. I don't care. Thomas, are you really going to go against your own father? Charles had taken care of Thomas's mom until her last moments. Thomas, being the kind and gentle soul he was, couldn't stand up to Charles. Reluctantly, I moved into the in-laws' house as Charles ordered. Charles lacked any sense of decency. After his shower, he would wander around half-naked, leaving the bathroom door open while using the toilet. Even though I was there, a woman in the same space, he didn't care at all. When I complained, Charles would immediately explode in anger. He would get mad shouting that I was merely just his son's wife. This is my house, damn it! Don't act all high and mighty just because you're married into this family. I'm sorry if I sounded arrogant. I just wish you'd be more mindful of your surroundings. Mindful of others in my own house? Don't be stupid. You're just a wife, so don't tell me what to do. As mentioned earlier, Charles didn't have a steady job. He would occasionally get work passed to him by acquaintances. I had no idea what kind of work it was. Even Thomas didn't seem to know the details. Charles was a man who loved both drinking and gambling. As a result, he was constantly short on money. When his funds ran out, he would sweetly beg me for money, using a creepy tone of voice. Hey Amelia, could you lend me another $100? What? But I just lent you some. Charles, this is the 3rd time this month. I always tell you I'll double it and pay you back. If I win, you'll benefit too, won't you? Not once had I benefited. Charles's persistence truly wore me down. In the end, I would always give in and hand him the money. After indulging in gambling, Charles would come home with alcohol. He'd get drunk on his favorite beer, never intending to pay me back. Hey Amelia! Stop dawdling and bring me a snack. Come over here and drink with me. No, thank you. Besides, Thomas isn't home yet. That's the whole point. Let's have some fun before he gets back. Just the two of us, all right? I'm really uncomfortable. Please stop. Getting close to Charles behind Thomas's back? That was unthinkable. I found him repulsive. But if he came at me with force, could I defend myself? I knew I had to keep a record of Charles's behavior for my own protection. So, I installed a small camera in the room to monitor him. If something ever happened, I'd have proof to defend myself. It had been 6 months since Thomas and I got married. I had gotten used to life at the in-laws' house. At the same time, it seemed that Charles had also grown used to me. His demands and actions became even more brazen, increasing my emotional strain. Charles, please, I'm begging you. Put on clothes as soon as you're out of the shower. Dad, think about how Amelia feels for a second. She hasn't known you that long and certainly doesn't want to see you naked. Huh? Is Amelia not interested in my body? She can look at it whenever she wants, front or back. I'm not interested at all. Please, stop. Charles grinned while showing off his pitiful physique. The harassment and teasing only escalated after that. He'd demand that I help him put on his underwear. That I should wipe him. Charles would say whatever he wanted, without shame. No matter what Thomas told him, Charles ignored it. Every day became a living nightmare for me. One day, Thomas told me suddenly that he was quitting his job. Since I was working too, it wasn't too big of a problem for us financially. Really? Why? I asked. Thomas glanced briefly in Charles's direction. Dad's job is getting really busy. I have to help him out. You're quitting your job to help? Will your salary increase? Decrease? What kind of work will you be doing, and where? I don't know if my salary will increase. It will depend on the result of the work. It seems the fluctuation is huge. I really want to say where and what kind of work it is, but they said to keep it a secret even from family and relatives. In the end, I learned nothing. All I could do was trust Thomas and send him off. Moreover, Thomas would be away from home for several months. Was he like some kind of migrant worker? I felt utterly helpless. Is Charles not going with Thomas? Or maybe Charles could go in Thomas's place. They prefer younger guys. What, you don't want to live with just me while he's gone? I didn't mean it like that. Of course I hated the idea, but there was no way I could say that. Still, what kind of work are Charles and Thomas involved in? I tried to find out in every way I could think of, but I never got any answers. Neither of them would tell me a thing. I figured Charles might open up after a few drinks, but even then. Don't ask. You don't need to know. And knowing won't change anything. He closed himself off like that. If it was a dangerous job, I wanted him to quit right away. I'd even secretly asked Thomas to stop once. But he just smiled sadly and shook his head. Dad says Mom's treatment is costing a lot, and they have debts. I have to help pay them off, too. That's why I'm doing this. I couldn't tell if he was lying or telling the truth. There was no way for me to know. Maybe Thomas felt the same uncertainty. Soon, Charles also started being away from home more often, and I found myself alone much of the time. One day, an expressionless man in a fine suit showed up at the door. His name was Robert. He introduced himself as Charles's superior. There was a dangerous air about him. I immediately sensed it. He wasn't some law-abiding citizen. When Charles came home and saw Robert, his reaction confirmed my suspicion. "Boss! What are you doing here?" "I've told you not to call me that." "Sorry, Robert. I came to talk about your son's next assignment." I was asked to leave the room. I didn't even need to serve coffee or anything. A few minutes later, Robert poked his head out and called for me. When I went in, they told me Thomas would be working abroad. He'll be spending about half of each year overseas. I know it'll be hard, but hang in there, okay? It was the worst news. Being separated from him within the country was hard enough. But now, in our first year of marriage, we'd be living with an ocean between us. Thomas was pretty upset, too. He had no choice but to comply, it seemed. His destination was the Philippines. Apparently, they needed young workers, so only Thomas would be going. Charles and I would stay here, continuing our two-person life. On the day of his departure, we hugged at the airport and cried. I couldn't shake the feeling that this might be our final goodbye. Somehow, I just knew. Thus began my life alone with Charles. I tried to spend as little time around him as possible. Of course, I had to protect my chastity. There could be no mistakes. I wouldn't shower until he was asleep, and I never drank with him. Just because there was a security camera didn't mean I could let my guard down. I lived each day carefully, always on edge. Eventually, he must have noticed I was avoiding him entirely. Charles, drunk, shouted, "Don't get too cocky. Do you really think someone like me would be attracted to a cold woman like you? You're so full of yourself. You can say whatever you want. Just make sure you put the dishes in the sink after you're done drinking. I'll wash them when I get back. Hey! Where do you think you're going this late at night? You're my son's wife, aren't you? Can't you even sit and drink with me?" My relationship between Charles was only getting worse. At times like this, I would go to an internet cafe to pass the time. If only Thomas were here with me. For how many times have I wished that? I had no choice but to endure the hardships, counting down the days until Thomas came home. A few years after Thomas went abroad for work, I welcomed him back at the airport for a short stay, and we finally spent some time together as a couple again. As usual, he didn't talk much about his work. But that didn't matter to me. I was content just being with him. And I was sure he felt the same way. The day of his next departure has arrived. We embraced tightly at the airport, just like the last time we said goodbye. "I'll see you at Christmas." Thomas waved with a smile. I wiped my tears and waved back. Little did I know what fate awaited us in just a few days. One day, Charles came home with a gloomy look on his face. He was usually all smiles, so I wondered what had happened. I asked if his stomach was bothering him. Charles slowly shook his head. "Thomas got caught in an accident in the Philippines." "What? Thomas? Is he okay?" Charles shook his head again. His expression showed how hard it was for him to deliver the news. Apparently, Thomas had been in a car accident in the mountains. The bus Thomas was on fell off a cliff. They've already cremated the body over there. No way! I wanted to fly to the Philippines. But I had no idea where to start looking once I got there. Even when I asked Charles, he refused to tell me anything and told me to give up. "I'll take care of all the paperwork. Don't even think about going over there, okay?" Where exactly was over there? The Philippines? Or was it the other world where Thomas now was? Devastated by reality, I spent my nights crying. I tried to gather as much information about Thomas as I could. But there was no news about the accident. Even after checking the international news, there was no mention of a bus crash in the Philippines. Thomas's remains also hadn't been sent back yet. Slowly, I started to lose the will to live. Days of deep sorrow passed. I began to wonder what I was living for. 3 years had passed since then. One day, as I was trudging home from work as usual, an unexpected figure was standing in front of my house. It was Thomas, who was supposed to be dead. "Welcome back. I came to see you." "Thomas!" I didn't care if it was a dream or a hallucination. I clung to Thomas, sobbing. I could feel him. He was undeniably alive. "How? What happened?" "I was told you died in a bus accident. That you'd been cremated in the Philippines." "Dad told you that, didn't he?" "Don't worry. I'm alive, just as you can see. I'm really sorry I couldn't contact you all this time. I've been waiting for a chance to escape." "A chance to escape? From who?" "Dad's associates." Apparently, Charles had told a pretty elaborate lie. He had colluded with a few close allies to deceive the organization. If the truth came to light, Charles wouldn't get off lightly, it seemed. "Wait a minute. What organization? Were you part of that organization, too?" "I wasn't really a part of it. More like I got captured and forced to work for them. Dad tricked me into it." Charles was part of a mafia. Apparently, Thomas was trapped by that organization. He was given a room and lived with a few others in the same situation. They forced us into labor alongside the locals. We earned money, and that money went straight to the organization. But then, Dad and his buddies tricked the organization. "Tricked them? You mean they betrayed them?" "Yeah. They faked an accident and took some of us laborers away to work somewhere else. Thanks to someone, I managed to escape and get back. But Dad's other friends were caught by the organization." It was hard to believe this all at once. But since he was saying it, there was no choice but to believe. Apparently, Charles still didn't know that the betrayal had been found out. Thomas came back to cut ties with the organization and with Charles. Still processing everything, Thomas hugged me tightly again. "Let's end this today. And start fresh, somewhere far from Dad." "Yeah. Let's do that. I've been wanting that for so long. To just start everything over." Nothing had ended yet. Even though I knew that, tears welled up. Seeing Thomas again, when I thought I'd never see him. This made me feel content. I wasn't afraid of anything anymore. A few hours after reuniting with Thomas. As usual, Charles came home. His face was red. It seemed he had been drinking. He muttered something while looking at his smartphone. "Is something wrong?" "Huh? Oh, not really. I just haven't been able to get in touch with my friends since yesterday." "Your friends? From work?" "Yeah, something like that. By the way, did anyone visit while I was gone? Anyone looking for me?" Feigning ignorance, I replied. "No idea." Charles looked suspicious. He must have noticed how happy I was. I couldn't hide the joy of reuniting with Thomas. Suspicious. "You're hiding something, aren't you? Aren't you hiding something from me, Charles?" "What? No, I'm not." "Is that so? Well, whatever. By the way, I'll be leaving this house soon." Charles widened his eyes. It was written all over his face that he hadn't expected me to say that. His shock was obvious.
Why now? This house holds so many memories with Thomas, doesn't it? You didn't divorce him because you still had feelings for him, right?
I'm just fed up with living with you. You walk around naked after the shower. You leave the bathroom door open when you use it. I can't live with someone like that.
We've talked about that before. This is my house. I can do whatever I want.
So, you have no intention of being considerate of the people you live with? That's exactly why I need to get out of here. I can't live with someone like that. Charles tilted his head, clearly confused. He knew something was off. It was getting harder for me to keep it hidden. The joy of reuniting with Thomas was overwhelming.
Just say it. What are you hiding? There's something, right? Isn't there?
Charles, you talk first. There's something you've been keeping from me, isn't there? If you tell me everything right now, I'll share everything as well.
No progress. Enough already. You're just the wife of my son, don't get ahead of yourself.
It seemed like his anger had reached its peak. Charles lunged at me. Of course, I had already anticipated this reaction.
Thomas, who had been hiding, stepped forward and positioned himself between us. Thomas! You're back? But then why didn't you contact me?
Well, why don't you try contacting your friends? I don't think anyone will answer.
Did the organization find out about me?
Thomas's silence was the answer. Charles's face grew paler by the second. He realized he had become a target of the organization. He must have just figured out how terrifying that was. The organization Charles was involved with, and Thomas too, for that matter, was essentially the mafia. The punishment for deceiving the mafia and causing them losses was severe. Charles would likely face harsh consequences.
This is the worst. When and how did they find out?
A member of the mafia came all the way over there, crossing the ocean to meet with me. They couldn't track down the information about the bus accident, so they came to check it out for themselves.
It's been 3 years.
It's just that this person only recently got wind of the accident. They're quite busy with other matters. Charles mumbled something to himself, likely trying to figure out a way to escape from the mafia. There's no way out, Thomas cut off Charles's train of thought. I've been told not to let Dad escape. Sorry, but you'll have to stay put.
Please, Thomas, let me go. That's not happening. I'm angry too, you know. You forced me into labor by lying to me. And you made Amelia suffer while living under the same roof. You'll face punishment.
Thomas knows I've been recording everything happening in the house. He's aware of how much pain Charles has caused me. Though it wasn't visible on the outside, Thomas was undoubtedly furious. It was only natural, given how he had been deceived and forced into harsh labor for years.
Forced labor? When did I ever do such a thing? You lied and told me Mom had debts. I believed you, and that's why I took on all those difficult jobs. He lied to you about that. I worked hard, and you just took the money. You've been living easy all this time, haven't you?
Thomas's cold gaze was full of disdain. Charles didn't deny it. That meant it was the truth. He had been exploiting Thomas's innocence all along. Charles was now flustered. He looked like he was searching for a way out. Of course, we had no intention of letting him escape.
What Dad did was illegal. He had us growing plants that are prohibited in the US and exporting them. Isn't that right? I don't know anything. I know nothing. Maybe you didn't handle the day-to-day, but you must have heard something. You had to have known what your associates were up to if you were sending people their way.
So Charles's role in the organization was recruiting people? It seemed I had hit the mark. Charles's face twisted in pain as if I had struck a nerve. Thomas had done his homework on the crimes Charles and his group were involved in. Realizing that everything had been discovered, Charles seemed deeply disturbed. Surely, there were many others who had been deceived and forced to work like Thomas. Even though it had only been a few years, the anger of those whose precious time had been stolen was immense.
I'm going to the police and tell them everything. Where Dad and the others are in the Philippines, how they bring the goods into the country, every route and method. Stop! I won't allow you to do that. Do you think you're in a position to give orders? You better think carefully before you speak.
It was the first time I heard Thomas yell. Maybe Charles was just as surprised. The arrogant attitude he usually displayed disappeared in an instant. Thomas was younger and taller. And since 3 years ago, he had become more muscular. It must be the result of the harsh labor. Charles realized he couldn't win with brute force.
Fine. Calm down, Thomas. I'll go to the police myself. Is that good enough? I'll turn myself in and confess everything. Sorry, but I don't trust you at all. I think you're just going to run away. Please believe me. I'm really sorry. I regret lying to you, taking you to the Philippines, and forcing you into hard labor for 3 years.
Even to my ears, Charles's apology sounded insincere. He was probably thinking of finding a way to escape from here. It was just a gut feeling, but it seemed like he was planning that. Thomas must have thought the same, because the suspicion in his eyes remained as he looked at Charles.
I get that you're sorry for what you did to me. But what about the mafia? Huh? The mafia? Why do you care about that? Just answer the question. You tricked the mafia and stole us as laborers. Then you used us privately for 3 years to make a profit. Isn't that right? You betrayed the mafia. What do you think about that? Well, I guess I do feel bad about that. But honestly, I think it's their fault for being tricked. I kind of feel proud of how we pulled it off.
Charles laughed smugly. It seemed like those were his true feelings. He had betrayed the mafia he was part of and profited from it. And Charles seemed to feel a certain amount of pride about that. It was an outrageous statement. And then, someone who had been hiding appeared. A man in a suit entered the room silently. Seeing his stern expression, Charles's face turned pale. His eyes seemed to be saying, "Why are you here?" It was Robert. The man who had claimed to be Charles's boss 3 years ago.
Boss! I told you before, stop calling me boss. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to betray the mafia. You didn't mean to betray them? You lied to the mafia, kidnapped people to make them work, and you still didn't mean to betray them.
With that threat, Charles shrank back. The first person to notice Charles and his group's lies was Robert. He seemed to be as sharp as he looked. He had noticed something suspicious about the reported bus accident and had been secretly investigating.
The Philippines wasn't even my territory. It took me 3 years to figure out your lies because of that. You really pulled a fast one on me. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. I'll hand over all the money we made to the mafia. So please, forgive me. You really think you can get away with just that? You idiots. You've set a terrible example. What if others start thinking they can trick the mafia and make a profit without getting caught? What then?
Charles was utterly terrified by Robert's outburst. The arrogant front he always put on when he was around me had completely disappeared. If he was so scared, Why did he even betray the mafia in the first place? Did he really need the money that badly, enough to risk everything? I honestly couldn't understand. Robert, without losing that piercing glare, suddenly turned sharply toward Thomas.
Thomas, I'm sorry to ask, but can you leave him to me? There are some things I can't let the cops get involved with.
Oh, sure.
I don't really care either way. Thanks. I know you've been suffering for years because of him. Trust me, I'm going to make him wish he'd been handed over to the cops. It's going to be that brutal. So, you'd better prepare yourself, Charles.
Please, have mercy. Charles's tears were genuine. He apologized deeply right there on the spot. The pathetic way he kept glancing up at Robert was pitiful.
Boss, I beg you, just this once, let me go. Please, I'm begging you. Give it up. Most of it's already been reported to the higher-ups. Even if I let you off, someone else will catch you eventually.
Charles began sobbing quietly. It was ironic. He was the one who had done wrong, yet he was the one crying out of fear of the punishment. I couldn't understand this man at all.
Please, can't you make an exception? I'll give you half of the sales, no, all of it. I'll hand it over to you, I swear. Are you trying to bribe me? How cheap do you think I am, huh? I'm sorry.
Robert wasn't someone who could be swayed by money. In fact, things only got worse after Charles's desperate attempt. Charles realized he had made a grave mistake and began to tremble. Seeing this, Robert clicked his tongue. His eyes were filled with disdain.
What were you planning to do after earning that dirty money by betraying the mafia? Well, I had to pay off my wife's debts. Don't lie. There were never any debts from Mom. I already know the truth. Charles only wanted more money for gambling and alcohol. I've seen it for years. Isn't that right, Charles?
Don't say that. Charles glared at me, his eyes full of anger, as if to say I'd gone too far. But it was too late now. Robert let out a deep sigh.
So, it was all just for your own selfish greed, huh? Just admit it already.
Yes. I'm sorry.
You idiot.
Robert pulled out his smartphone and made a call. Minutes later, several cars pulled up in front of the in-laws' house. Men in suits got out. They were all with intimidating expressions. Following Robert's orders, they shoved the weeping Charles into one of the cars. It looked like he was about to face even more severe questioning at the mafia's office.
Help me! Forgive me, he screamed in my direction.
His final act of desperation was such a pitiful sight. Apparently, Charles went through hell at that office. As Robert had warned, turning himself in would have been a lighter punishment. I don't know, nor do I want to know, what kind of punishment the mafia reserves for their own. But it seemed like they didn't take his life. Robert later informed Thomas about it. Want to know where he is now? India. Looks like he's actually working pretty hard over there.
India? You mean like when I was sent to the Philippines to do hard labor?
Yeah, something like that, except Charles is in a far worse situation. A worse situation? What do you mean? Apparently, Charles is now working as a sewer cleaner. He has to crawl into the pipes and scoop out the filth. The sewers are filled with toxic gases and bacteria. It's a dangerous job where many people die, and nobody volunteers to do it. It may be a punishment, but it's a harsh one. For all the money he secretly pocketed from the mafia, he's going to work hard to pay it back. Though, at this rate, he'll probably get sick before he can repay everything.
So, how much did Dad actually steal?
Well, I don't know.
$50,000 isn't a small amount, is it? I mean, if you're doing janitorial work in India and trying to make $50,000 in US dollars, who knows how many years that would take? In Pakistan, I heard that someone doing similar work earns around 25,000 rupees a month. That's about $300 in US dollars. Even if they put everything they earn toward paying off the debt, it would still take more than 10 years to clear it. If I were in the same position, I'd probably feel completely hopeless, like I had no reason left to live. Surrounded by waste. I can picture Charles wading neck-deep in sewage. The water would be dark and murky, probably so foul that even wearing a mask wouldn't block the smell. I can even imagine hearing his sobs echoing through the sewers. I've heard that many workers pass out from the gases or suffer burning pain in their eyes. I wonder if Charles will ever make it back to America safely. Honestly, I couldn't care less. Right now, I'm enjoying a happy life with Thomas. The old in-laws house, filled with bad memories, is on the market. Thomas put it up for sale. We rented a new apartment, starting fresh as a couple. Maybe the big change in our environment is what did it. We finally got the news we'd been hoping for. We're expecting a baby. It's funny how we couldn't get pregnant at all while living at the old place. But the moment we moved, it just happened. It's strange, isn't it? I guess where you live really does make a difference. Amelia, let's keep working together from here on out, okay? We've got a lot ahead of us. The doctor said it's going to be a boy. I want to raise him to be honest and caring. Someone like Thomas, who's trusted and loved by everyone around him. I'm determined not to let him turn out like someone as awful as Charles. Things won't always go the way I plan, but even in tough times, I know I'll make it through. Because I'm not alone. I have my partner by my side, the one I love. I forgot to buy it. My husband, William, laughed merrily as soon as I cornered him. He must have deliberately not bought only my ticket. Oh, William, you klutz! Carol, my mother-in-law, was laughing so hard, holding her stomach, as she called out to William. Everyone was laughing uproariously, and I felt really sick. That's fine. I'll just go home, I said with a sigh. Do that. A fancy hotel doesn't suit someone like you, right? It's for the better. William was smiling. Don't go dining out alone and splurge, okay? I'll be checking the receipts afterward, Carol said with a laugh and a condescending tone. All right, now that it's decided, let's hurry and go. Donald, my father-in-law, cheerfully called out to William and his wife, and they headed to the boarding gate. How low do these people think of me? I can never forgive them. I took out my mobile phone and called someone. Surely, the three of them will regret this. I am Jessica. I turned 50 this year. Currently, I live with my husband, William. Donald and Carol live nearby, about a 15-minute walk from our house. I met William over 20 years after becoming a working adult. In my current job, I'm in charge of sales. Recently, I haven't been able to achieve my sales targets, and going to work every day has been depressing. Naturally, my spirits are low. Under such circumstances, sales don't follow. Being scolded by my boss for poor sales performance only made me dread going to work more. I felt like I was caught in a negative loop. That's when I met William. We met in the break room of the 10-story building where I work. This building houses several companies, and there's a communal break room on the 3rd floor. During lunch break, female employees from other floors would eat sandwiches they brought. After being scolded by my boss, I would often rest in this break room. And today, after failing to meet my sales targets again and being loudly scolded by my boss in front of everyone, I was sitting alone on a chair, feeling down. Then William approached me. Are you okay? You look so gloomy. Actually, having been approached by William, whom I met for the first time, I confided in him about my work troubles. Perhaps because William was from a different company, I felt comfortable talking to him. William listened to me with empathy. After our conversation, William said to me, "From now on, I'll listen to you. So, let's exchange contact information.
Thank you so much. I nearly cried from William's kindness, but managed to answer with a smile. I think I already liked William at that time. William and I gradually became close. We started dating and, after a while, began a relationship. Then, a year into our relationship, William proposed, and we decided to get married. As soon as we decided to marry, we met Donald and Carol.
We're looking forward to it. As for helping us out, just do what you can without overdoing it.
Carol was smiling and seemed kind.
Once you marry William, let's all go on a trip together,
Donald said, laughing heartily. Donald seemed like a regular person, and I felt reassured. Then the two of us decided not to have children. I was in my late 40s when I married William. Having a child at this point would put a lot of strain on my body. Besides, William also said,
I want to live a life with some financial leeway. I also want to take care of my parents.
I agreed with William's suggestion, wanting to work hard at my job too. And so, we bought a new house together. We combined our savings to buy it outright, though it was a small house. Would become even happier. I believed so. However, I came to realize that it was all an illusion. Since getting married, I've been frequently troubled by Donald and Carol. For example, their sudden visits. Ever since William and I bought our house and started living there, Donald and Carol would come over without contacting us first. Then, they would point out in detail how I was lacking as a housewife. At worst, they would open the fridge and closets without permission and check their contents. Then they would scold me while screaming,
What's with this fridge? There's only cheap supermarket beef in here. You're feeding this to William?
Carol would scream upon opening the fridge today, as usual. Well, we can't exactly buy expensive meat all the time. We used up our savings because we bought the house outright. That's why we're trying to save as much as possible. So, when Carol complains like that, it puts me in a difficult position. I had no choice but to endure Carol's criticisms. Then, one day, once again, Donald and Carol came to our house. As usual, Carol brought a large paper bag, intending to take something from our house. Initially, Donald and Carol would come empty-handed, but after a few visits, they started bringing a large paper bag. And every time, they would take away a large amount of food and daily supplies from our house. Everything Donald and Carol took was paid for out of my wallet. I was becoming increasingly uncomfortable with Donald and Carol's lack of restraint. As I was feeling bewildered by Donald and Carol, Carol picked a dress from my closet.
What is this dress? It looks expensive. You're wasting money again. Ah, that's...
I couldn't help but raise my voice. Carol was holding and showing off my dress. Seeing the dress, I turned pale.
Carol, please don't open it without permission. And that dress is a birthday present from my mom. Please, give it back.
I desperately tried to get the dress back from Carol. In fact, this dress was something my mom had cherished for a long time. For work, my mom would wear famous brand clothes when going to clients. This dress was given to me by my mom.
Jessica, you're old enough now. Become a dignified woman like me.
So, this is something I cannot give to Carol. However, Carol looked at the dress and laughed.
This kind of nice dress is still too early for you. I'll wear it for you. Be grateful. How could you? It's a birthday present from my mom, you know?
I was on the verge of tears. Then William, who had been watching the whole time, said with a laugh,
Mom's offering to wear it for you, be thankful. You're a wife of the Smith family. It's a wife's duty to listen to Mom, isn't it?
William always tried to make me concede with the phrase wife of the Smith family. This wasn't something new. On the first weekend after we got married, when I was called to the in-laws' house from the morning and told to weed the garden, William said that.
It's a rule for the wife of the Smith family. Now, get on with it.
William sounded as if he was someone of higher status, using his position to act superior. But I didn't want to give up the dress. As I stayed silent, feeling humiliated, Donald said authoritatively,
William took an older wife, and we can't even see a grandchild's face. At the very least, doing us favors is your duty, isn't it?
Even though I'm the same age as William, Donald's notion that it's okay for a man but not for a woman irritates me.
Yeah, exactly, Dad's right. So, give the dress to Mom.
William nodded as if it was only natural.
How terrible!
There's not a single ally in this house. No matter what I say, I'm made out to be the villain. Carol was happily putting the dress into the paper bag. So, I reluctantly complied with William, Donald, and Carol. And the problem isn't just Donald and Carol. There's also a big problem with William. Recently, William has been coming home late, and there have been many days we haven't eaten dinner together.
I'm home.
Today again, William comes home at 1 a.m. in a good mood. He must have been drinking. His face is red. Welcome back. I greet William with a puzzled look. William, without caring about how I feel, spoke to me.
I'm going to take a shower. Can you put away my bag for me?
William hands me his bag and heads straight to the shower. It's always like this, I say in disbelief as I go to put his bag in his room. Then, I heard a notification sound from a mobile phone inside the bag. William left his mobile phone in his bag again. William always carries his mobile phone with him, but today, perhaps because he's drunk, he forgot it in his bag. If it's an emergency work call, it could be serious. I gently take William's mobile phone out of the bag. And as I look at the screen to check, I freeze.
What is this?
Displayed on the mobile phone was the name Lisa.
Today was so much fun. But it got late, haven't your wife noticed? I'm worried. Love, Lisa.
Reading this text, I was convinced of William's affair. Then, there were several more texts from Lisa. Some of them were explicit, and it became clear that William had been cheating for a long time. I took photos of the mobile phone screen expressionlessly, one after another. I thought this would be useful as evidence of William's infidelity when the time comes. However, this alone wasn't enough as proof. I sighed. Besides, I'm already 50, and it would be difficult to remarry after leaving William. Without children, the thought of being alone from now on was mentally tough. What should I do now? Holding William's mobile phone, I was at a loss. Then one day, William said to me,
The anniversary of Mom and Dad's wedding is coming up. Hurry up and plan the trip.
William expected me to act as if it were a given. I understand. I could only nod in agreement with William. Every year, we present a trip to Donald and Carol for their wedding anniversary. Of course, William and I also accompany them, catering to Donald and Carol. We have been booking the same hotel every year, and I plan to book it again this year. But then, William suddenly said something unexpected.
That's right. Since it's the 50th anniversary of Mom and Dad's marriage this year, book a special hotel for them, will you? What?
I was bewildered. The usual hotel was already quite high grade. Moreover, the cost of the hotel is all paid from my salary. William would say,
Paying for the trip and showing filial piety is the role of a son's wife. It's my role to have fun there and show them a good time.
That's why booking a too expensive hotel would only increase my burden. As I was puzzled, William said in a bad mood,
It's their 50th wedding anniversary. Don't you have any respect for my parents?
William continued to nag, insisting on how I lacked awareness as a wife. Exhausted by William's lecture, I simply replied, I got it, and ended the conversation. When thinking of a higher grade hotel, only one hotel came to mind. The reservation process for it was a bit special. After successfully making the reservation, I approached William. I've booked the hotel, William said with a nasty smile.
Make sure it's a hotel that I like, okay? I won't accept it if it's an inferior hotel.
William looked ready to find fault with an unpleasant face. I sighed at William and replied, It's a distance by plane, but it's a respectable hotel. Look, this should satisfy you, right? Showing him the hotel's homepage on the mobile phone, William nodded in satisfaction.
Well, this is barely acceptable. Have you booked the flight yet?
Not yet. It shouldn't be crowded this time of year, and it's a weekday. I think booking a flight won't be an issue. As I answered, William said something unexpected.
I'll book the flight.
This was a sudden offer from William, who had never taken initiative before. Surprised, I asked,
Really?
Then William smiled broadly.
Yeah. You always works hard, so I can at least book the flight. Thanks for everything.
Thank you. I sincerely thanked William. I thought William was finally becoming cooperative. Maybe William was starting to change. That's what I hoped. However, my decision at that moment would greatly shake the situation. On the day of the trip, William went to pick up Donald and Carol first, so I was to meet them at the airport.
Sorry to keep you waiting.
Arriving with my and William's luggage, William and the others were already at the meeting spot. And for some reason, Donald, Carol, and William were smiling maliciously. I had a bad feeling. As I thought this and looked at their hands, each was holding a plane ticket. I called out to William,
"Can I get my plane ticket too?"
Then, in the next moment, William said something unbelievable.
"I forgot to buy it."
William was laughing cheerfully. "Just mine." Unable to believe this sudden revelation, I asked William.
"That's right. I bought tickets for Mom and Dad, though. Ha ha ha."
Saying so, William sported a malicious grin. That attitude made me realize he must have deliberately not bought only my ticket.
"William, you're such a klutz."
Carol, laughing so hard she was holding her stomach, called out to William. Everyone was laughing uproariously, making me feel really sick.
"That's fine. I'll just go home,"
I said with a sigh.
Do that. A fancy hotel doesn't suit someone like you, right? It's actually for the better."
William was smiling.
"Don't go dining out alone and splurge, okay? I'll be checking the receipts afterward,"
Carol said with a laugh and a condescending tone.
"Well, now that it's settled, let's hurry and go."
Donald happily called out to William and the others, and the three of them headed to the boarding gate. How low do these people think of me? I can never forgive them. I took out my mobile phone and called someone. Then I immediately purchased a ticket on a different flight than William and his party. Surely, the three of them will regret this. At 3 p.m. that day, I received a call. My phone was on silent, so it didn't ring, but the caller was William. As I thought. I laughed maliciously and ignored the call. Actually, the flight William and his party were booked on was a morning flight. Check-in was at 3 p.m., so they probably planned to enjoy some sightseeing upon arrival. I, however, headed to the luxury hotel they were planning to stay at before them. And at the luxury hotel, I approached a certain person waiting there. "Mom. Sorry for the sudden visit." That person was my mom. I apologized to Mom as soon as I saw her.
"What on earth are you doing, Jessica? You went to all the trouble of booking this high-grade hotel. Now you're saying suddenly you can't stay?"
Mom asked, looking exasperated. Actually, I told Mom about everything that William, Donald, and Carol had done. I also mentioned how Carol had taken the dress Mom gave me. Then, visibly angry, Mom declared,
"I will never forgive them. I'll get that dress back."
Then Mom and I plotted a plan. We earnestly requested the cooperation of the manager, Stephanie. Once we had a rough plan in place, William and his party arrived at the hotel. I spotted William and discreetly hid behind the front desk. William, unaware of me, approached the check-in desk with a smile, followed by a cheerful Donald and Carol.
"We have a reservation at 3 p.m. under Smith. I don't see Jessica with you."
Stephanie responded with a puzzled look. The reservation was made under my full name. It was natural for Stephanie to say so. William, seemingly unfazed, confidently informed,
"My wife couldn't make it due to sudden illness. It shouldn't be a problem, right? Someone else will come later, so there's no need to cancel the reservation."
Although I had a good idea of who the someone else might be, I remained silent, listening. Stephanie smiled broadly at William and declared,
"If Jessica is absent, the reservation cannot be used." "What?"
William and his party froze at Stephanie's sudden announcement. Then, William repeatedly called me, probably out of confusion. Quickly regaining her composure, Carol confronted Stephanie.
"What do you mean by cannot be used? Jessica made the reservation for us. And we've come all this way by plane."
Carol looked visibly confused. "We came here today also as a celebration. So please, somehow, allow us," William said, trying to persuade Stephanie. Stephanie sighed as if in resignation.
"If you insist, you may use it. But you'll be willing to pay the additional charges, right?" "Additional charges? What do you mean?"
William asked Stephanie, surprised. Stephanie glanced at a woman sitting nearby. President. Maybe it's time to tell them the truth.
Right, I'll handle this. Thank you.
During the exchange between Stephanie and the woman, Carol looked puzzled.
Who is that woman? Wearing those dark sunglasses?
Carol began to say, but stopped abruptly, as she recognized the woman.
You're Jessica's mother, aren't you? Why are you here?
Carol said, looking confused. Mom and Donald and Carol had only met at family-only weddings. Mom smiled warmly in response.
It's been a while. By the way, where's my Jessica? She's not feeling well.
William continued to lie in response to Mom's question. Mom sighed at William's response.
Don't lie. I spoke to Jessica on the phone earlier and she sounded fine. Moreover, this hotel reservation was made using our company's corporate rate. If she isn't here, you'll have to pay the standard rate.
At Mom's mention of our company, William, Donald, and Carol began to show obvious signs of confusion.
What? It would be about a 70% increase. Can William and his family afford that?
Mom chuckled.
What are you talking about our company? Jessica didn't mention any corporate rate to us. And she never told me about you either.
William spoke with confusion. Clearly, the overload of information was too much for him to process. Carol also addressed Mom.
Is this a corporate rate from the company you work for? What a benefit you have even for a low-level employee. Your company must be a small one with generous welfare.
Carol's sharp remark caused Mom's brow to furrow. I had never gone into detail about Mom with William, Donald, and Carol. Since they never asked, I hadn't shared much about her. So, when Mom revealed her identity, William and the others were visibly shocked.
Me? I am the president of Kia Holdings Corporation. Jessica is, in fact, the designated future president.
Mom said this with a bright smile.
Kia Holdings Corporation? That's a major company.
Carol exclaimed loudly. Donald and William also looked shocked. Kia Holdings Corporation is one of the top travel agencies in the country. They also operate hotels and restaurants, among other businesses. In fact, this hotel falls under our group, allowing us to use it at a significantly reduced rate. Kia Holdings Corporation is a dynasty, with our family leading it for generations. And currently, Mom is the president of Kia Holdings Corporation. I know the company Jessica works for, but it's not Kia Holdings Corporation. Melissa, are you lying to us? William glared at Mom. William and I work in different companies within the same building. That's why William said such a thing to Mom. Mom laughed and explained in a humorous tone.
That company is just where she is seconded to. So, her actual affiliation is with Kia Holdings Corporation. She has completed her training and plans to return to the headquarters the year after next.
Saying so, Mom handed her business card to William. William looked at the business card and his face turned pale.
So, you really are the president of Kia Holdings Corporation?
William's body trembled slightly. Next to him, Donald and Carol also looked pale. Donald is now retired and living on a pension, but he used to work as a corporate employee. He seemed to have worked for a mid-sized company, and I heard from William that he retired as a manager. The difference in status between Donald, who retired as a mid-sized company manager, and Mom, who is the president of a major corporation, was stark. Then, Mom continued her attack.
That dress. I gave it to Jessica. Why are you wearing it? It's my special dress for important occasions.
With that, she glares at Carol.
I'm sorry. I'll take it off right now.
Carol, turning pale, hurriedly looks for a place to change. After quickly changing, she returns the dress to Mom.
If there's even a slight fray, I'll be billing you for the repairs, understand?
Yes. Carol replies meekly to Mom's declaration. Then, William, as if remembering something, murmurs.
I need to tell Lisa not to come here.
Mom doesn't react as if she hadn't heard him. However, I didn't miss his murmur. Stepping out from the front desk, I shout loudly.
Lisa won't be coming. Jessica? Why are you here? I called you several times.
William is clearly shaken. Carol is just as agitated.
Jessica! You weren't supposed to have a ticket, and now you've even took my dress.
She nearly screams. Mom quickly retorted.
The dress was Jessica's to begin with. It's not yours.
Donald is also quite flustered.
Kia Holdings Corporation, that's a bigger company than the one I worked for. And she was the president,
he says, disheartened. Prideful as he is, the revelation probably wounded his ego.
I came on a different flight. To get revenge on you all,
I say with a smile.
So, Lisa not coming is? I made sure she wouldn't come. Right after you all left on the plane this morning, I called her.
The day I found out about William's affair through his mobile phone, I discreetly visited a detective agency and requested an investigation. I obtained Lisa's contact information along with the investigation results. I had planned to talk to Lisa directly at some point, but this occasion prompted me to call her directly. After our conversation, Lisa made a decision. I calmly tell William the truth.
Lisa has decided to break up with you. After I contacted her about compensation, she apologized. I was only after William for his money. I was never serious about someone old like him.
Lisa was still in her 30s. The reason she dated William, who was 20 years older, was for his money. She was attracted to the idea of being treated to meals and receiving brand items from him. Lisa had been quite clear.
He invited me to travel with his parents, so I thought it was time to end things. I didn't want to marry William anyway.
Hearing this, William was shocked.
That's a lie, right? I was thinking of divorcing to be with Lisa.
William. Carol consoles a stunned William. Donald also shows sympathy towards William. Mom and I look on coldly at the three of them. Then, I make my final decision to William.
I'm also divorcing you, William. Now you're free to date whoever you want, not just Lisa.
At my mention of divorce, William becomes defensive.
I have no intention of divorcing. It's meaningless without Lisa. I'll never sign any divorce papers. After all, there's no conclusive evidence of infidelity.
Carol echoes William's sentiment.
That's right. We won't allow a divorce. After all, Jessica is the future president of Kia Holdings Corporation, right? We can lead an even wealthier life.
Carol's eyes gleam unervingly. Donald also seems pleased, probably anticipating financial support from me. However, I won't let things go their way. I glare back at them.
Then, how about you look at this?
I hand over the results of the detective agency's investigation to them. The evidence clearly shows the affair. Photos and texts provide irrefutable proof. Faced with undeniable evidence, William and the others turn even paler.
They even followed us here. How?
Looking at them, I let out a laugh.
The condition for waiving Lisa's compensation was that she testify favorably about mine and William's divorce. It'll be interesting to see what she says if it goes to court.
As I laughed, William's face turned ashen. His face was filled with despair. Donald and Carol looked as if they had been thrown into the depths of hell. I had no intention of forgiving William, Donald, and Carol. I was prepared to fight them to the end, ensuring they fell into their own hell. Eventually, the divorce between me and William was finalized. William resisted until the end, but eventually caved.
I'll apologize as many times as it takes. Just please spare me from divorce. If I had known you were the future president of Kia Holdings Corporation, I would never have cheated.
He pleaded with me. But I was relentless. Mom recommended a competent lawyer, and I confronted William with evidence of his affair. William was left speechless by the evidence.
Considering how this is going, should we talk about increasing the compensation?
I suggested, turning William's face even paler.
I'm so sorry.
With that, William hastily signed the divorce papers. Despite all his resistance, it ended anticlimactically. Although I didn't demand compensation from Lisa, she ended up being fired. As it turned out, Lisa worked for a company affiliated with Kia Holdings Corporation, so Mom talked to the affiliate.
This isn't what we agreed on.
Lisa was reportedly in tears, but that was none of my concern. Lisa would likely struggle with job hunting from now on. Even after the divorce, the trouble with William continued. William, Donald, and Carol started lurking in front of my workplace building. It seems William's misconduct had been exposed to his company because of the divorce. William had been involved with several other women besides Lisa. Some had interacted with William for promotions. However, since Mom had connections with the president of William's company, she revealed all of William's actions. The president was furious and demoted William. This led to a surge of internal complaints against William. Some were even considering filing official reports. Eventually, William felt uncomfortable continuing at his job and resigned. And so he became unemployed. Donald and Carol, being retired and not working, couldn't support an unemployed William. Carol had always been a housewife, and Donald had only ever reached the level of manager before retiring. Their income wasn't high, and their pension wasn't enough. With me gone, they couldn't afford their luxuries anymore and were dissatisfied. That's why they conspired with William to ambush me at my workplace. What a hassle. I consulted the police, but they couldn't act immediately. However, a decisive moment came. One day, I ignored William and his group waiting to ambush me and tried to enter my workplace building. Then William approached and grabbed my arm.
Ouch! Let go!
But William wouldn't release his grip.
Getting cocky because we've been quiet. We're struggling without money. We'll remarry and you'll support us again,
William said, pushing a marriage consent form at me.
Just sign it. It's for our sake, so hurry up and sign.
Carol also grabbed my arm, forcing a pen into my hand.
Don't even think about running away.
Donald was there too, blocking any escape.
Enough is enough.
As I was struggling, a voice called out.
William and the rest of you, stop it right now.
It was Mom. Mom. Relief washed over me as Mom arrived to help. Mom always came to my rescue.
Security! Over here!
Mom called for the security guards. Donald and Carol panicked and ran off. The sight was pitiful.
Don't leave me behind!
Only William's cries echoed as he was left behind. Thus, William was caught by the security guards and handed over to the police. Marks from William's grip were left on my arm. Because of that, I decided to file a report this time. Donald and Carol may have escaped, but the police will likely contact them soon. William, Donald, and Carol have acted in a manner that will lose them social credibility. With no jobs, their future looks bleak. Since then, I have returned to the headquarters of Kia Holdings Corporation. William's whereabouts have become unknown after that incident. He seems to have fled to avoid arrest by the police. Donald and Carol returned to their house after the incident. Therefore, the police visited their house to hear their side of the story voluntarily. For my safety, I changed my workplace. Although I could have continued working at the same company, I was supposed to return the year after next anyway. Mom decided it wouldn't be a problem to return now. Since returning to the headquarters of Kia Holdings Corporation, my days have been bustling. During my secondment, I was involved in various job functions such as sales, accounting, and planning. I thought I had gained a considerable amount of experience, but the scale of the headquarters is completely different. Every single number is on a different scale, so there's a constant sense of tension. However, I have a reliable ally.
Jessica, we're going to visit our clients. You need to get your face remembered quickly.
Mom calls out to me.
I'm coming.
I hurry to follow Mom. This busyness helps me forget the painful past with William and the others. And I'm nothing but grateful to Mom, who has helped me through tough times. To repay Mom, I continue to look forward today.
Break your promise and you're dead meat. Don't even think about running away from here.
The dirty old man grabbed Rebecca's arm, trying to drag her out of the car. I desperately pulled Rebecca's hand, resisting with all my might. I had to shut the car door, fast. We needed to escape this town, now. In no time, I heard Melissa and Raymond's voices too.
Rebecca, wait! Do you have any idea what's gonna happen to us because of you?
The three adults going berserk on the dark streets, it was nothing short of insanity. In this backwoods town with no streetlights, I kept running away from these lunatics, together with Rebecca. How on earth did things turn into such a blood-curdling, horrific nightmare? I had come back home after getting news of Rebecca's wedding from Mom, supposedly to celebrate. My name is Jessica. It's been over 8 years since I left my rural family home to live on my own, and I'm now 27. Currently, I work in sales at a pharmaceutical company in Los Angeles. I'm single, but still want to focus on my career for now. Selling new drugs developed by our company to various medical schools and hospitals is grueling work, but it gives me a greater sense of fulfillment than anything else. Pharmaceutical companies and doctors joining hands to save as many patients' lives as possible, there's no greater joy. I moved out of my parents' place right after graduating high school, at the same time as I entered university in LA. I paid for everything myself, including tuition and living expenses. While in college, I juggled multiple part-time jobs. Even before that, back in high school, I had desperately saved up money from part-time work. I was determined not to rely on my parents at all. The biggest reason I wanted to get away from home was my dad. He was always drunk whenever I saw him, wasting money on gambling. He was the farthest thing from a father I could respect. If I was in the same room as Plaster Dad, he'd start harassing me, while Mom just went along with whatever he said. Our family business was farming, and with things the way they were, money was always tight. I decided I needed to take my life into my own hands as soon as possible. The only one I worried about was my one and only sister, Rebecca. Rebecca had a timid personality and got along better with our parents than I did. She's already 32 now, but forget getting married, she hasn't even become independent with a job, just helping out on the family farm. I have unpleasant memories of drunken dad badmouthing Rebecca, saying,
"Rebecca's got no street smarts. If she went out to Los Angeles, she'd just get suckered by some sleazebag and be in for a world of pain."
If you ask me, Rebecca may be a bit spacey, but she's a beautiful woman with porcelain white skin, and great at housework too. Wasting away in a house like this, she was too good for them. Plus, she was always so kind, sticking by my side no matter what. I adored Rebecca. Rebecca knew the state of our household well, so when I was moving out, I invited her to come with me. "You can look for a job after we get to LA. I'll work hard at my part-time gigs too. The two of us can scrape by somehow." But Rebecca just gave me a troubled smile and shook her head.
"I'm the oldest daughter, so I'm going to stay here and look after Dad and Mom. I need to help out if we're going to keep the farm going."
"That's got nothing to do with this. We're both adults. There are tons of families where all the siblings are independent. If you're gonna say you have to live with Dad because you're the oldest, then I won't move to LA either."
"No."
When I emotionally objected to Rebecca's unreasonable claim, she stated clearly to me,
"You go. You worked so hard to save up money, didn't you? Besides, it's not just out of obligation. I want to stay here because I'm truly worried about this house, and Mom."
Her big eyes stared straight into me. There was an unyielding strength in those eyes. Overwhelmed by her intensity, I ended up moving to the city by myself, though part of my heart remained. After that, my college life went smoothly. Balancing my studies with multiple part-time jobs made for a harsh lifestyle, but I was young and had stamina. I also had a fierce determination not to rely on my parents no matter what, so I managed to overcome it all somehow. My constant efforts in the face of adversity were recognized, and I secured a position at a major pharmaceutical company. The training and work after joining the company were even tougher than student life, but I enjoyed gaining business knowledge. And the dream that I would one day be helping to protect people's lives and health fired me up. More than anything, it was Rebecca who became my emotional pillar. Even after leaving home, I kept in touch with Rebecca through messages and phone calls. Some days she would care about my health, saying, "Don't overdo it and ruin your health, okay?" And on other days she would praise me, saying,
"Jessica, you're working so hard. You look so vibrant these days."
Each time, a warmth would spread through my heart, and I'd feel inspired to work even harder for Rebecca's sake. However, when I'd ask her,
"So how are things on your end?"
she'd be kind of vague, like, "Dad and Mom are the same as always." Or, "Our profits have gone down but we're getting by somehow." Even if I'd get worried and try to ask for more details about the situation, she'd just brush it off with, "Nothing's changed since you were here, Jessica." In reality, I never heard anything about Rebecca or our parents getting into any big accidents or anything, so I just told Rebecca,
Let me know anytime if something happens. Let me know anytime if something happens.
And then, before I knew it, I was 27. That day too, I got home late at night after entertaining clients. Keeping disagreeable doctors in a good mood for hours on end is extremely tiring, but I can manage it if I just think of it as part of the job, for the sake of my performance. As I tried to recharge myself with those thoughts, I checked my apartment mailbox and saw something rare inside. It was a letter from an individual, and looking at the sender, it was from Mom. After moving out, I had stayed in contact with Rebecca, but I hadn't communicated with anyone else at all, not Dad of course, but neither with Mom. They never reached out, and I never called or sent a single letter either. Now this sudden letter from Mom. What in the world could it be about? Still reeling from the surprise and unease, I entered my apartment and read it, exhausted. Reading the contents, I couldn't believe it. Apparently Rebecca was getting married. Huh? I hadn't heard a thing about this. Rebecca and I frequently kept in touch with each other. Yet not once had she breathed a word about a boyfriend, much less marriage. Why was I hearing about it from Mom like this, and not from Rebecca herself? A feeling I couldn't accept spread through my chest. The rest of the letter said that, for the wedding, they were holding a family meeting and I should come back home for it. Finishing the letter, I let out a sigh. Going back to my family home meant going to the house where Dad lived. The area my parents' house is in is truly the boonies, with houses really far apart, surrounded by expanses of farmland and woods. It's not even a town, it's designated a village. If I went back there, I'd have virtually no distractions. It's suffocating, almost like being trapped. Honestly, I wasn't eager to go. But if the news about Rebecca getting married was true, nothing could make me happier. I had thought Rebecca would end up taking care of Dad and Mom her entire life at this rate. If she had met a great guy, fallen in love, and decided to get married, nothing could make me happier. I wanted to meet her partner too, and of course I wanted to see Rebecca. And I wanted to congratulate her on the wedding. The next day, I wrote back to Mom saying I would attend the family meeting, and took paid leave on the appointed day. Then a few weeks passed, and it was the day of the meeting. I rode Amtrak for 7 hours to get to the city where my family home was, then planned to drive a rental car from there. The family meeting was also meant to be a dinner, so the sky was slowly turning to dusk. Away from the din of the city, in a quiet landscape devoid of neon signs or crowds of people, the sky was gradually dyed a deep red. It had been the norm when I was a kid, but coming back after 8 years, it seemed strangely surreal. I managed to arrive at my parents' house without getting lost. It was a dilapidated wooden house, visibly damaged here and there on the walls and roof even from a distance. I could tell the yard, overgrown with weeds, had hardly been tended to. The house was a mess, despite Rebecca's best efforts to keep it clean and tidy. She was overwhelmed with the responsibilities, and it showed. As I stepped inside, memories of my troubled childhood came flooding back, trapped within these walls. It left a bitter taste in my mouth. There was no guest parking, so I had to leave my rental car a short distance away and walk the rest of the way to the house. By then, the sky had darkened considerably. Deep navy blue blended with the remnants of a purple sunset, creating a stunning gradient. The vast expanse of the sky and the crisp air made the first few stars visible. A few crows cawed ominously, their voices echoing through the stillness. With a mixture of nostalgia and resentment, I approached the house's grimy door. That's when I heard it. The faint rustling of grass. Startled, I spun around to find Rebecca standing there, her face tense and uncharacteristic of someone about to attend a family meeting. Despite the years apart, Rebecca was still breathtakingly beautiful. My beloved sister, right there in front of me. It was my favorite Rebecca. But this was no joyful reunion.
Rebecca!
Shoo! She raised her eyebrows and held a finger to her lips as I started to speak. Confused, I stood there dumbfounded as Rebecca lowered her voice.
Why did you come back? What?
Wasn't it obvious? I was there to celebrate her wedding. Yet instead of welcoming me, she seemed angry, even upset, at my return. I thought there was a family meeting.
Never mind that, we're leaving.
Cutting me off, Rebecca grabbed my arm firmly. She dragged me along as she ran, giving me no choice but to follow. None of this made sense. But it was clear that this was no simple family meeting. The situation was far more complicated. Rebecca led me to one of the few bus stops in the village. She pulled me behind a small shelter that doubled as a waiting area. "Hey, what's going on?"
I thought we were having a family meeting tonight about your wedding,
I whispered. Out of breath, Rebecca hung her head in silence. Then, we heard footsteps approaching. It was rare for anyone to be out walking at night in this village. It was easy to tell there was only one person coming. Rebecca shielded me, hiding me behind the wall as she peeked out to check the alley.
"Mom!"
Rebecca's face turned pale in an instant. Through a gap in her arms, I caught a glimpse of Mom in the alley. In the years I'd been away, Mom seemed to have aged a bit. But even more shocking was that her expression was twisted as if to say it was the very face of a demon. There was still some distance, but it was clear that Melissa was calling out Rebecca's name. Rebecca turned to me and said in a strong tone,
"Get away from here right now. And go back to Los Angeles."
"Why?" "Hey, what's going on?" As if to say there was no time to explain, Rebecca quickly shook her head.
"Make sure Mom doesn't find you. Dad too. Make sure no one you know finds you. Run away from here as soon as possible."
Overwhelmed by Rebecca's intensity, I nodded. "Okay. But what about you?"
"I'll meet up with Mom and then go back home." "What, you mean?"
If Rebecca meets Mom. If Rebecca goes back home. What will happen, I wonder? I don't know anything. But my instincts told me I couldn't let Rebecca go home like this.
"Rebecca, this way."
This time, I pulled Rebecca's hand.
"This is so weird. Mom's acting strange too, and this situation is all messed up. And you say you're getting married, but you don't look happy at all."
"Jessica." Rebecca lowered her eyebrows sadly, still entrusting one hand to me.
"I can't return you like this. There's still time now. Let's just run away like this. Let's go to Los Angeles together."
"But..."
"Hurry."
While Rebecca hesitated, Mom was getting closer. I pulled Rebecca's hand even harder. Whether it was guilt towards her family, or a sense of relief from being freed from the current bizarre situation, Rebecca stared at me with tears in her eyes and gave a small nod.
"Let's go."
We held hands and ran with all our might. Our destination was the rental car I had arrived in. The village was completely steeped in night, and the road with hardly any streetlights had poor visibility. Although we almost stumbled on pebbles along the way, we ran desperately. Rebecca didn't let go of my hand. Soon, we arrived near the car I had come in. As I was inserting the car key, Rebecca suddenly let out a scream beside me. I turned around involuntarily. In the distance, mountains stood in a row, and in the pitch-black scenery with only fields around, I faintly saw the shadow of something. Was it a monkey or an animal? Or was it something else, something living that we shouldn't see? Wrinkled skin, hair growing chaotically from the head. Underneath, something like eyes shone sharply. I mustn't get near this thing. I got goosebumps involuntarily. Before even considering who it was, I felt a physiological disgust.
"Get in the car, quick!"
Rebecca shouted in a scream-like voice. That voice was much more tragic and tinged with madness than when she saw Mom. With my hands trembling from fear and anxiety, I finally managed to open the car door. Meanwhile, the figure lurking in the darkness was approaching. I quickly opened the passenger door to get Rebecca in. The person approaching behind Rebecca was an old man. His wrinkled face and overgrown hair looked unsanitary at a glance, while the tacky gold accessories around his neck and wrists reflected the car's headlights. Who was this old man? Was there such a person in this village? There was no time to think. The old man eerily extended his black arm from behind Rebecca and forcefully grabbed her arm, just as she was about to slide into the passenger seat.
"Eek!"
Rebecca's scream echoed. The old man was trying to forcibly drag Rebecca out of the car.
"Where are you running to?"
The old man groaned in a low, hoarse, beastly voice. Rebecca seemed about to slide off the car seat. I immediately jumped out from the driver's seat to the door on the opposite side.
"Let go! Let her go!"
I grabbed the old man's hand that was holding Rebecca from above. With all my strength, I dug my nails in and pried the old man's palm and fingers off Rebecca's arm. Physical strength is vital in sales. And from routinely carrying large amounts of documents, I have a fair amount of strength. While doing so, I stuck out one leg and kicked the old man's foot. The old man stubbornly twisted his body, trying to pull Rebecca closer.
Trying to run away, you ungrateful child. Don't think you can escape from here.
The old man shouted such things as he grappled with us. After such a brief battle, my strength combined with Rebecca's resistance, and we managed to pry Rebecca from the old man's grip. Just before he changed his stance to grab Rebecca again, I barely managed to close the passenger door. Before he could circle around, I returned to the driver's seat and quickly started the car.
Don't break your promise. You stupid woman.
I heard the old man's shouting voice from behind. And from somewhere, catching up, I even heard Mom's voice and then Dad's.
Rebecca, wait. Do you have any idea what will happen to us because of you?
The sight of the three adults going berserk on the night road was nothing but abnormal. And from the situation, it was clear that the old man and our parents were in cahoots. Rebecca kept her head down. Just go. And muttered in a voice that seemed to fade away. That was my intention from the start, so I nodded and pressed hard on the accelerator. As we started to drive, we both let out a big sigh of relief and fatigue. Like a suspenseful drama, I was dumbfounded for a while as I drove. Even with Dad, I half gave up on having a perfectly amicable meal, but I never dreamed it would turn out this crazy. After driving for a while, we arrived at a place where commercial facilities were starting to come into view. Still much less bustling than the city, the lights of convenience stores and commercial facilities on either side considerably reassured me. My marriage was forcibly decided. Rebecca, who had been quietly crying in the passenger seat until then, suddenly spoke. As I suspected, it wasn't her own will after all. Otherwise, she wouldn't have looked so distraught before her wedding. What on earth happened? I prompted Rebecca to continue.
The man who tried to grab me in front of the car, he's one of our family's creditors, she revealed.
We're in debt?
My eyes widened in shock as I turned to face Rebecca. I quickly reminded myself not to neglect safe driving.
I'm so ashamed and saddened that this happened under my watch. You remember how bad Dad's drinking and gambling got even when you were still at home?
Yeah, that's why I moved out. I wanted to take you with me, Rebecca.
She smiled faintly and said, "Thank you for that, by the way."
After you left, no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't get him to stop. Every time he drank, he'd rant about things he hated, hit Mom, and I desperately tried to stop him. It was a vicious cycle. I tried to get him interested in other hobbies, inviting him to watch movies or cook together, but nothing worked. If anything, his habits only got worse. But we're just farmers. It's not like we make a lot of money. Eventually, we couldn't make ends meet anymore. That's when he turned to borrowing money.
I can't believe it.
Drinking himself into a rage, squandering precious living expenses on gambling in an instant. I couldn't imagine how painful it must have been for her to witness Dad's conduct over these past 8 years. My chest ached with a wrenching mix of pity and remorse.
He'd buy massive amounts of alcohol with the borrowed cash, screaming that he'd win it all back gambling the next day. But of course that never happened, and the debts just kept piling up.
I don't know if I should ask, but how much does he owe now?
Around $70,000.
$70,000?
I cried out so loudly, I thought the car windows might shatter. How much money did he have to burn through for it to reach that astronomical sum? Faced with such an unimaginable debt, my hands shook on the steering wheel.
I couldn't take it anymore. We had no way to pay it back, so Mom and I went directly to the creditor to beg for mercy. To that Kingston guy from earlier. We pleaded with him, "We'll take full responsibility for repaying the principal Dad borrowed, so could you please forgive at least the interest?" And then
Rebecca fell silent after saying this much, trembling slightly.
"You don't have to force yourself if you don't want to talk about it."
"No, I'm okay."
So then, he said, "If you marry my grandson, I'll cut the interest in half." That's how my marriage was decided.
No way, you've got to be kidding me.
Dad was more than happy to accept those terms, even though it didn't mean he'd have any more money to spend himself. And to think he'd offer up me, his own daughter, so easily to an unwanted marriage. It really hurt to realize I was just property to him.
Rebecca went on to say that Mom just went along with whatever Dad said, so she didn't oppose it either.
There's more. I really don't want to say this, but Kingston the creditor then said, "You've got a sister in Los Angeles too, right? Hand her over as well, and I'll waive the interest completely."
As Rebecca finished recounting her story, she sobbed, tears rolling down her face. A chill ran down my spine. It seems he had intended to lure both Rebecca and myself into his household from the start, deliberately inflating the debt to gain leverage in negotiations. Trading your daughters for money, like some horrific custom from decades past, I couldn't believe this was happening to my own family. Overwhelmed by the terror of it all, I had to pull over onto the road shoulder. Now that my hands were free, I embraced Rebecca's shoulders in the passenger seat.
Rebecca, I'm so sorry you had to go through that.
No, I'm the one who should apologize for letting things get this bad, for not being able to stop Dad, for getting you dragged into this too. I'm so sorry.
There, amidst the streets still tinged with a rural atmosphere, we two sisters held each other and cried freely. I couldn't imagine how painful, lonely, and hopeless her days must have been. I wondered why I couldn't have helped her sooner.
Things got so bad, I considered running away. But he threatened me, saying if you try to escape, I'll hunt down your sister and drag her back here. That's why I couldn't say anything about this the last time we spoke on the phone. I'm sorry. Rebecca, you've been shouldering this burden all alone. It must have been so hard. But it's going to be okay now. I'm here for you. We'll get through this together.
After crying together for a while longer, we got back in the car and hit the road again. Since we had left the village early, we were able to catch the overnight train. With Rebecca by my side, I returned to the now familiar sights of Los Angeles. Glancing at Rebecca walking beside me and the lingering goosebumps on my skin, I was reminded that the series of events in that village were not just a dream. By the time we arrived at my apartment, we were both exhausted. We ate breakfast together and took a nap in the warm, cozy bed. Afterwards, Rebecca pulled the IOU for the debt in question out of her pocket.
Actually, I've been carrying this on me at all times.
That's my sister for you, good thinking. With this, we have options. Especially here in Los Angeles. I took one more day off work and immediately looked up reputable law firms. That same day, Rebecca and I visited one, IOU in hand. The lawyer had a serious expression as he explained several things to us. Afterwards, we stopped by the municipal office to consult about cutting ties with our parents. After Rebecca stayed with me in my apartment for about a week, we decided to visit our family home once more. To declare to our parents that we were severing our relationship. The moment we came face to face, Dad was already furious, while Mom sat next to him trembling, her face pale. Either he was already drunk or his face was flushed red with rage. As soon as he heard that we wanted to cut ties, he bellowed,
"Don't screw with me!"
He grabbed a nearby bottle and brandished it at Rebecca. I leapt forward just in time to stop him.
"You too, Jessica! If you had just come home like a good girl, everything would have worked out!"
He shouted, this time trying to hit me with the bottle.
"Cut it out already!"
Shielding Rebecca, I desperately dodged Dad's relentless attacks. Our defensive battle against Dad's rampage continued. But in a moment of vulnerability, the bottle Dad was swinging struck my shoulder hard.
Ow!
Crying out from the impact, I fell to the floor with a thud. But immediately after, I glared up at Dad and announced in a low voice,
"Dad, this is all being recorded, you know."
Just as Dad let out a stupid sounding,
"Huh?"
I glanced back towards the living room entrance. From there, a man in a suit holding a camera quietly emerged. He was the lawyer in charge of our debt consultation, Mr. Young. Mr. Young calmly stated,
"This is video evidence of domestic violence."
I had deliberately created an opening, letting Dad hit me, to capture concrete proof of his violence on camera. Dad sputtered,
You coward! Calling a lawyer, you city folk are always so damn sneaky."
Mom and the lawyer tried to calm Dad down and get him to take a seat, but he resisted, shouting all the while. But then the lawyer dispassionately declared,
"As we have clear evidence of violence here, we will be calling the police now."
And with that, he smoothly proceeded to contact the police.
The police? Isn't that going too far?
still clutching the bottle he had just hit me with. Dad was visibly shaken. Mom's face turned ashen. It was entirely possible that in this situation, Dad would fly off the handle at the slightest provocation and make any discussion impossible. Besides, even if he called the police on us, Rebecca and I were cutting ties anyway. We had nothing left to lose. Surprisingly, the police arrived with uncharacteristic speed for such a remote village. 2 sturdy male officers showed up, looking strong enough to easily subdue a drunk old man in his 60s like Dad. Seeing them, Dad clicked his tongue and deflated.
What, you're here to arrest me or something? That has not been decided yet. We will be discussing those matters and more with you now.
Flanked by the 2 policemen, the lawyer declared this clearly. Dad's demeanor took a complete 180 as he meekly sat down, looking uncharacteristically compliant. Young opened the IOU and explained that neither Rebecca nor I were listed as guarantors, so we had no obligation to repay our parents' debt.
Furthermore, you 2 confiscated all of Rebecca's money and used it to pay back the debt. And in order to serve Mr. Osborne's personal interests, you robbed Rebecca of her free will and tried to force her into marriage. Rebecca can sue you for attempting to file a marriage certificate without her consent. Sue? Who's gonna listen to some outsider from the city?
Dad tried to lash out again, but the police officers glared at him. He promptly fell silent once more.
In addition, we have the footage of the domestic violence incident from earlier. Moreover, Rebecca has several unnatural bruises on her body.
The lawyer spoke matter-of-factly, but I could hardly bear to hear this.
After speaking with her directly, it seems highly likely these bruises are the result of violence inflicted by Mr. Osborne. In this case, it is possible to either demand compensation or treat it as a criminal matter.
I hung my head, on the verge of tears. When I deliberately let myself get hit earlier, it hurt quite a bit. Rebecca had endured that pain over and over again. At the hands of Dad, who lost all self-control when he was drunk. How painful and difficult it must have been for her. I will never forgive Dad for everything he's done, nor Mom for failing to stop any of it.
What bruises? You got any proof?
Dad shouted. Mom started. Please, have mercy on us. Groveling in a deep apology.
We're already in ruins just from the debt alone. It's not like I wanted to hand my daughter over to that man either. But we had no choice. And now you want to cut ties too? Compensation? That's impossible. Please, don't do this.
It's too late for that now, Mom. You never even tried to protect Rebecca until things got this bad.
You're one to talk, running away from home. That's right, you're working in Los Angeles now, aren't you, Jessica? I bet you're making good money. If you paid off Raymond's debts for us, couldn't we just sweep this all under the rug?
Mom looked up at me in tears, fawning. Rage exploded in my head. It wasn't just Dad in the end. This woman was also someone who only saw her own children as money or property.
Enough already! Like hell I'm paying! What do you 2 think your kids are? Rebecca and I are human beings. We're not money printing machines or things you can just do whatever you want with.
I shouted at my parents. I wanted so badly to hit them, but I restrained myself somehow, knowing that if I resorted to violence, the story would change.
Both Rebecca and I want to live our lives freely. We're cutting ties with this household. From now on, Rebecca will be living in Los Angeles too. We won't be contacting you at all.
Leaving those words behind, I grabbed Rebecca's hand and briskly walked out of the house. The lawyer followed close behind us. The police officers said,
"We've heard what you have to say. We'll hand off the rest of this matter to our colleagues in Los Angeles,"
and then left. We decided to handle any future discussions of compensation or lawsuits through our lawyer. Afterwards, I took care of various procedures while Rebecca lived together with me in my apartment. Then a few months later, as a result of the trial, our parents were slapped with a restraining order preventing them from contacting Rebecca or myself. They were also obligated to pay back the money they had taken from Rebecca. And we were able to demand compensation from Kingston, the creditor who had tried to force Rebecca to marry his grandson. The IOU was passed on to Kingston's son. The fact remained that Dad had borrowed a massive sum, so our parents would have to work at the factory run by Kingston's son to pay back the debt. As a rural factory, the wages were nothing to write home about. Who knows how long it would take them to pay everything back. Furthermore, after consultations with the lawyer and experts, Dad was diagnosed with alcohol dependence. Treatment would require money for hospital visits and counseling. On top of the debt repayment, those expenses ensured they would have zero financial leeway for luxuries like alcohol. If anything, it was questionable whether they could even maintain a normal standard of living. While our parents were left to face the consequences of their actions, Rebecca and I, having successfully cut ties with them, lived together happily and peacefully. Through my acquaintances and friends, I introduced Rebecca to a job. With her diligence and good manners, she quickly won over her employers and secured the position. More time passed, and then,
Rebecca, is that true?
She had some surprising news for me. Apparently, one of her coworkers had asked her out, and they had started dating. I was overjoyed for Rebecca's newfound love and cooked a special dinner that night.
Jessica, you're way too excited about this. It's kind of embarrassing.
I can't help but be thrilled. Not only did we finally free you from being trapped in that house, but now you've found a boyfriend of your own free will. I'm so happy I could cry. Tearing up with joy, I clasped Rebecca's hands.
Jessica, thank you, truly. It's because I had you that I can walk my own path in life now.
No, that's not true. It's all thanks to how hard you worked, Rebecca. Jessica and I had both found partners in our line of work, and we were making plans for a double date in the near future. The Rebecca I saw now was a far cry from the grief-stricken, desperate woman from that nightmarish evening. She exuded vitality and healthfulness, radiating an aura of happiness as both a person and a woman. We were determined to continue doing the work we loved, using the money we earned to enrich our own lives. We would date partners of our own choosing, with hopes of eventually getting married. As we each sought fulfillment in our individual lives, I knew our friendship would endure, the bond between us unbreakable.
Thank you for looking after our 1-year-old Aria for a year. We're off to pick up my daughter now.
The two, Anthony and Chloe, got married triggered by Chloe's pregnancy, but their reckless behavior often disrupted my life. Requests to watch the child or for money were endless. When I refused to care for the child, they would leave granddaughter Aria near my house without a word, leaving me no choice. Then one day, suddenly, there was no contact, and Aria was nowhere to be seen. Just when I thought it was resolved, I was about to learn an unwelcome truth.
What do you mean? I haven't been looking anyone.
Huh? Chloe and Anthony insisted they had left Aria with me. Hearing their story, the worst-case scenario crossed my mind. Parents who abandon their child to gallivant abroad for a year cannot be called parents. I decided to fight, collaborating with someone. It's pitiful for Aria to be raised by such unaware adults. What will happen when their true nature is revealed? I am Camila, still working at the local department store at 65. After giving birth to my sons Anthony and Luke, I divorced and raised them alone. Luke, the free spirit, expresses himself well, while Anthony, the elder, is a bit shy. After high school, Luke went hitchhiking abroad without hesitation and now lives overseas alone. Anthony, unlike Luke, tends to retreat into his shell. He has complained about the struggles of working in a factory and living alone but seems to be managing. It's been about 23 years since Anthony moved out. One day, I received a call from Anthony. His excited voice came through immediately after I answered.
Hey Mom, there's someone I want you to meet.
Anthony called excitedly. What's the rush?
Just look forward to it.
The call from Anthony ended quickly. On the day we agreed, Anthony came home looking unrecognizable. It's been a while, what's with that outfit? He was dressed as if a mannequin from a shopping mall had outfitted him.
I stumbled into a store with a friend and felt destiny from that day.
There was a considerably young woman next to Anthony. What's this all about?
Hello, I'm Chloe.
The woman introducing herself as Chloe greeted me in a high-pitched voice. "Oh, nice to meet you. And your relationship is?"
Didn't Anthony tell you?
Chloe hit Anthony's back hard enough to make a sound, but Anthony didn't seem to mind and smiled.
"I'm going to be a dad soon,"
he said, looking at Chloe with his nostrils flaring.
"That's right. I'm 7 months pregnant now."
I could only alternate my gaze between a smiling Chloe, caressing her belly, and a happy Anthony. 7 months pregnant means you're married to Anthony?
Well, something like that.
Normally, if there's a feeling of wanting to announce a marriage or pregnancy, shouldn't it be shared a bit earlier? I looked at Chloe again, but still, it didn't add up. Chloe seemed quite young, but do people generally want to marry someone significantly older, like Anthony? At a glance, Chloe and Anthony could even be mistaken for parent and child. However, I thought it odd to point this out here and kept it to myself.
"Oh, right. That's what I came to say today."
She pulled out a mobile phone from her bag, opened a certain online shopping website, and showed it to me. Is something wrong with the bag on the screen? The screen displayed a bag from a high brand.
"I want this as my baby gift. I want to get it before my favorite celebrity's birthday party, so please make sure it's this month."
She was asking for a super famous brand bag costing over $5,000. Baby gifts are traditionally given after the birth, and besides, I've never heard of giving such an expensive bag as a gift. I work too, so I have a bit of financial leeway. I was willing to help in any way I could, but what's the right move here? It didn't seem right to refute Chloe's request upon our first meeting. Feeling this, I decided to ask Chloe why she wanted the expensive bag so much. "I see you want it badly, can I ask why?" Then, Chloe changed her expression and looked at me with a beaming smile.
"This person is my favorite celebrity. It's a collaboration bag, and as a fan, I just have to have it."
Chloe operated her mobile phone and showed me the screen. A website with a modern-day idol holding the bag. The man's photo was featured prominently. Oh, I see. Still unsure of what to do about the baby gift, I decided to think it over for a while. I'll ponder what to do after getting the news that the baby has been born. While I was thinking this, Anthony contacted me to say the baby was born. Relieved that the birth went well, I sent a text. I heard from Anthony. Relieved to hear everything went well. Congratulations on the birth. Please rest up now. However, I soon got a reply from Chloe, but what was written was something I never anticipated.
"Lucky we made it in time. The deadline for depositing for that bag is tomorrow. Cash is fine. Please send it over."
My head began to ache at the audacity of her position. Normally, I would speak up if something seemed odd. However, I didn't want to sour our relationship here, and more importantly, I shouldn't stress Chloe out right after giving birth. Without much thought, I decided to give $1,000 in cash as a gift. 4 days after I sent the money, I got a call from Anthony.
"Hey Mom, what's this about? Because of you, Chloe's bedridden right after getting discharged."
Me? How am I related to her being bedridden?
"She won't get out of bed because she says the gift from you isn't enough for the bag. Now I have to take care of Arya and can't even go to work."
It seems they named the baby Arya. A name I learned only through this call. Chloe was so fixated on the bag she wanted that she forgot to even mention her name. Are you saying she's bedridden because the gift wasn't enough to buy her the bag?
Yeah. Stop making Chloe upset and try to get along with her.
But I sent what I thought was a respectable amount for a parent. I didn't expect her to be bedridden over this. Dealing with such unreasonable demands was something I was tired of. Yet, unaware of how I felt, Chloe kept contacting me. usually to ask for something or to make inconvenient requests.
I'm short on living expenses this month.
Her tone suggested she was waiting for me to send money. I decided not to fall for it and played dumb.
That sounds tough.
Things are hard here too.
Just send $500 for now.
Demanding a significant amount out of the blue, what was she thinking?
Even if you suddenly ask for $500, then, can you look after Arya for a bit? That wouldn't cost you anything, right?
I was willing to help within my means, but I have work too and can't always be available. Regardless of my situation, Chloe frequently asked me to babysit.
Could you play with Arya the day after tomorrow?
I can't take the day off because it's a sale period.
Why not hire a babysitter?
Chloe responded with a tone that made her displeasure obvious.
How can you be so heartless and leave our baby with strangers? Are you saying you're okay with leaving her with someone you don't know?
Her confrontational behavior took me by surprise.
It's not about being okay with it. I'm just saying it's hard when you suddenly ask me to take care of her. I have work and other commitments too.
The call ended there. But this was just the beginning of unbelievable actions. On the day Chloe asked me to take care of the child, as I was about to leave for work, I noticed something resembling a basket near my apartment. Curious about the oddly placed basket, I approached and felt warmth. Hearing faint breathing, I lifted the cover to find a baby wrapped in a towel embroidered with the name Arya, sleeping.
What is this? It says Arya, that's Anthony's child.
In a panic, I tried calling Anthony, but it went to voicemail. When I called Chloe, she answered.
Hello, Camila. Why so early in the morning?
What are you thinking, leaving Arya silently in front of my place?
Then, Chloe answered lazily.
Because the event of my favorite celebrity was decided, I couldn't help it. I thought you wouldn't mind taking care of Arya.
You could have consulted earlier or contacted in some way. What if she got hurt or kidnapped being left at my doorstep like that?
It's a bit much to worry about, isn't it?
You're overthinking. Eventually, I couldn't just take the day off on such short notice and had to leave Arya with a nearby babysitter to go to work. From that day on, Chloe started leaving Arya at the front of our apartment. On days I wasn't working, I took care of her, thinking it wasn't the child's fault. But leaving her like this every time without notice was troublesome, so I installed a security camera. Fortunately, since then, there hasn't been a basket with Arya in it left. Maybe Chloe finally woke up to her responsibilities as a mother. However, about 10 months later, my expectations were shattered. During a rare day off at home when the phone rang. It was Anthony, and his voice seemed a bit too cheerful. Speaking as if joy and excitement were mixed in his voice.
Hey Mom, it's been a while. You're home, right?
Yes, but it's been about a year, hasn't it?
What's the sudden call for? Then, from the other end of the phone, Chloe, unexpectedly, spoke up.
Thank you for taking care of Arya for a year.
Anthony, snatching the phone, overlapped with Chloe's words.
We're coming to pick up Arya now.
I was completely lost at what the two were saying.
What do you mean? I haven't been looking anyone.
Oh come on, Mom. We're already on our way to the nearest station. It's been a long time since I've been back home and I want to drink the coffee you make. Despite of everything, it was kind of you to care her for a year.
Their answers made no sense to my questions, and I couldn't understand their conversation at all.
What? You're saying I've been looking after Arya? Who else but Mom? I can't wait to hear Arya's voice.
Anthony's carefree voice could be heard. I was scared by this baseless claim, fearing the worst.
I don't know what you're talking about. Huh?
From the other end of the phone, I could hear Chloe and Anthony talking.
I have no idea what you're talking about. Isn't Arya with you right now?
Oh, Camila, stop joking.
You can't say that right after coming back home. Coming back home means you've been somewhere?
Then Chloe's voice faltered, and everything went silent.
Hey, explain what you mean by left her? Where's Arya?
After my question, the phone call ended. As I was trying to call Anthony, I saw him and Chloe running towards the apartment balcony. I could clearly see them coming towards here, pulling suitcases. The doorbell rang, and when I went to the door, Anthony and Chloe were there, drenched in sweat.
What's going on? Where's Arya?
So, I told you, I don't know. Why are you asking me?
Because we left the basket here before we left.
Chloe stuttered in her response, and Anthony looked uneasy. We thought she'd be safe with you. I had installed a security camera because you two had left Arya here without notice before. But nothing was captured on the recording.
We thought we left her where it would be obvious. Wait, what should we do now?
Chloe suddenly became flustered, and Anthony froze, prompting me to fear the worst. Of course, there are blind spots in the camera's view, but what if she was taken from somewhere out of sight? Feeling a sudden surge of fear after suggesting the worst-case scenario to them, I said, "We should go to the police. We can't handle this alone." Police? If people find out we went to the police, imagine what people would say.
Yeah, there's no need to make such a big deal out of it.
Despite the gravity of the situation, Anthony and Chloe's indifferent comments raised my suspicion. How can you say that? We need to start looking for Arya right now.
I'll contact the police, so don't do anything unnecessary. Let's just look a bit more before that, okay?
Do they have a reason for not wanting to contact the police? Even with such a suggestion, I couldn't help feeling anxious. Noticing my distress, Chloe loudly clapped her hands as if she had an epiphany.
Ah, I remember now. I left her with a friend before we left the country. It's fine, I'll go pick her up now.
Is that so? I went straight to the airport from work on the day we left, so I wouldn't know.
It's okay. Anthony, you go home first. I'll go to my friend's place and bring Arya back properly.
Watching Chloe and Anthony rush off like a storm, I could only stand and watch. Their mannerisms and the way their eyes moved gave me the impression Chloe was lying. Although she said she left Arya with a friend, it seemed unlikely to be the truth. Driven by a desire to resolve the situation quickly, I decided to act on my own without telling Chloe. I searched everywhere, local police stations, child welfare facilities. It turned out that about a year ago, Arya was found in a basket by a passerby and had been under the care of a child welfare facility. It was surprising to find out that there was nothing to clearly identify Arya at the time of her discovery, except for a towel embroidered with her name. Seemingly, she was left in a blind spot without any surveillance cameras, making it impossible to determine her identity. Being Arya's grandmother, I temporarily took her into my custody. Now, how should I contact them? If I mention the child welfare facility, I can't predict what Chloe might say. While pondering for a good idea, one occurred to me. Following Chloe might reveal something. I remembered Chloe saying she had left Arya with a friend. Perhaps Chloe had someone in mind. I went near Chloe and Anthony's apartment and decided to observe the comings and goings from a nearby cafe. While keeping an eye on Chloe's movements, I arranged for a babysitter to take care of Arya. From the sizable apartment, people who appeared to be residents were continuously entering and exiting when someone resembling Chloe emerged. She quickly left the apartment and started walking. Curious, I decided to follow her. Following Chloe, I could see her entering a restaurant. Luckily, it was a fairly large restaurant, and depending on where one sat, it might be possible to listen in without being noticed. Given that Chloe's child was missing, she wouldn't come to a restaurant without a reason. I managed to get seated at a distance close enough to hear Chloe's conversation without being noticed. After a while, a man around Chloe's age entered the restaurant and sat down across from her. He looked like an average office worker, contrasting Chloe's preference for flashy makeup and revealing fashion. However, it seemed they had arranged to meet, as they greeted each other, asking if the other had been well after a long time. I focused on their voices, trying to pick up any hints from their conversation. Chloe seemed to be calling the man sitting across from her Nathan.
Hey, Nathan, how have you been lately? What do you mean by how? You know, like, about the baby?
Listening in, it seemed they were talking about a child. From Chloe's manner of speaking, it appeared she was probing this man, Nathan, about Aria.
What do you mean, like, about the baby? Never mind, forget it.
Anyway, it's been about 2 years since we split. What's up all of a sudden? Did you need something from me?
No, really, it's nothing. I'm going to go now.
Deciding it was futile to continue, Chloe grabbed her bag and rushed out of the cafe. Nathan looked confused, not understanding what Chloe was talking about. Thinking I might as well try, I approached Nathan after Chloe had left.
Excuse me for the sudden intrusion. May I have a moment?
Yes. What is it?
I'm the mother-in-law of the woman you were just speaking with, Chloe. I'm sorry for the surprise, but I'm curious about what you were discussing. If it's all right, could you tell me?
Initially, Nathan seemed guarded, but as I explained the situation, he relaxed. It seemed understanding I wasn't suspicious and that I was Chloe's mother-in-law made a difference.
Chloe's mother-in-law?
So, Chloe got married?
And you mentioned a child just now? Chloe, yes, she has a child. Oh, may I ask your name?
Nathan. Nice to meet you. So, about this child. As he said this, he offered his business card.
Yes. She married my son about 1.5 years or 2 years ago. I was surprised when she said she was 7 months pregnant at the time of their marriage. The child's name is Aria, but she's went missing and we were searching for.
Missing? Nathan, looking concerned about the child's well-being, asked.
Don't worry. As her grandmother, I took her in, and she's currently with a babysitter. It seems that about 1 year ago, Chloe left Aria at my house without telling me, but she was taken into care without my knowledge.
Nathan's tense expression relaxed. I'm relieved.
I've been searching separately from Chloe, and finding out she's been taken care of is also new to me.
Is that so? That explains it. I watched Nathan, who seemed lost in thought, his gaze dropping to the floor.
Chloe wanted to search for places she had in mind before reporting to the police, so that's why we were searching separately.
I showed him a picture of Aria.
Chloe really wanted to search on her own, thinking she had a lead. It must have been about you.
Then, Nathan, with a troubled look, hesitantly spoke. I told Chloe I didn't know what she was talking about regarding the child, but considering the timing, that child might actually be mine.
Mine?
I thought so, but sorry, I shouldn't have said that. He chuckled awkwardly, as if trying to dismiss his previous statement.
Aria is your and Chloe's child?
She's now 1 year old, and when you met, Chloe was 7 months pregnant, right? I just thought maybe. I was so shocked that I struggled to find the words.
That can't be, but when I think about it, the timeline matches.
I was incredibly busy with work at one point, unable to see Chloe often, and that's when she broke up with me via text, unilaterally. Then she blocked my calls.
Really?
Nathan nodded emphatically. Chloe said she needed to undergo cancer treatment and that we shouldn't see each other anymore. But from what you've told me, I realized that was a lie.
What would you do if Arya really is your child?
Nathan seemed contemplative but then looked up decisively. If Arya is indeed mine and Chloe's child, I want to take responsibility for raising her. Someone who leaves their own child on someone's doorstep is not fit to be a parent.
Having heard your story, I think we should consider a DNA test.
Nathan looked surprised. A DNA test, as in?
Yes. At this point, wouldn't you want to know if you're Arya's dad?
I would definitely like to proceed if possible. The day I learned about at-home DNA tests from a documentary and thought of trying one, I ordered a test kit. The time to use it had arrived. I hurried home to fetch it and returned to Nathan.
I have Arya's hair, so if I can get some of yours, we can quickly get the results.
Wow, they have stuff like this now? We decided to use the DNA kit, which allowed for easy testing with just hair samples. After exchanging contact information with Nathan, we parted ways, but I remember feeling anxious until the results came. 3 days after sending the test kit to the lab, the results arrived by mail. The DNA test confirmed Nathan was indeed the dad. There was only one thing left for me to do. It was time to bring everything into the open. I decided to invite Chloe and Anthony to my house. Arya has been found safe. Could you come over to my place? I had picked up Arya from the babysitter and waited for Chloe and Anthony to arrive. About 4 hours after my call, Anthony and Chloe came into the house and exaggeratedly approached Arya.
So she's been found. You made such a commotion, Arya. Dad's here. Arya, you've grown.
They tried to hug her with open arms as if it were a touching reunion. Arya looked puzzled for a moment and then started crying. Right then, Nathan appeared from the next room. You abandon your own child at Camila's place and that's your opening line? What kind of thought process is that?
Who's this? Don't interfere with our family matters.
Anthony, though bold in his words, clearly shook in the presence of a man larger and unknown to him. Chloe, on the other hand, seemed desperate to figure out how to navigate the situation.
No, he's like a friend or relative, sort of. What? So, he is a stranger. Please leave.
Anthony glared as he waved his hand dismissively. Nathan, holding the results of the DNA test that proved he was Arya's father, thrust them into Anthony's face.
I used to date Chloe, planning to marry her. But suddenly, she said she needed cancer treatment and couldn't see me anymore, and that was it. So? What does that have to do with me? Maybe Chloe just wanted to get away from you by lying.
Nathan, shaking with anger, raised his voice in response.
And then find her marrying you. You got to be kidding me.
Whether Chloe understood Nathan's feelings or not, she counted her split ends while replying.
Well, I wanted to live with someone wealthy. I was torn between Nathan and Anthony. But I chose Anthony because he seemed to have a promising future, just thinking about the child and myself. So, while you were promising to marry me, you were also seeing him?
Chloe turned to Anthony, smiling brightly.
Because Anthony is a manager at a famous company. He said becoming a department head in a few years isn't a dream. Investing in the child so it can support us later isn't a bad idea, right?
Anthony, getting carried away, bragged.
Well, when you work for a company like mine, you don't have to worry about money. It's easy to provide for a child, allowing them to live freely. Unbelievable. First of all, why would you do something terrible like leaving a child on the street? You have money because you work for a famous company? Don't joke with me. If so, use that money to properly care for the child.
Anthony, faced with this sound argument, began to falter, his confidence from moments ago seemingly a lie.
Why? Well, it's too early for a small child to go abroad, you know. Besides, asking Mom to take care of Arya, she'd be happy.
Anthony's gaze seemed almost pleading for help.
Because it would make Mom happy? Don't use your child to please your parents. Besides, even if it wasn't your mom, anyone would be annoyed by having a child left on their doorstep without permission. That you don't understand this by your age is unbelievable. Besides, even if it wasn't your mom, anyone would be annoyed by having a child left on their doorstep without permission. That you don't understand this by your age is unbelievable.
I gave Nathan a standing ovation in my mind. Well said. However, both Anthony and Chloe seemed to not grasp the meaning of his words, looking stunned.
It's truly unbelievable that there are parents who can't take responsibility for and cherish their own child. I especially can't forgive it since I was abandoned by my parents as a child. I will raise Arya.
Just as Nathan was about to embrace Arya, Anthony stood up.
There's no way a young single man like you can raise her. Come on, Mom, say something to this ridiculous man. If it continues like this, Arya will be taken away. Is that okay?
I was despairing over how shallow Anthony could be.
Someone who leaves their child on someone else's doorstep for selfish reasons doesn't deserve to be a parent. No, I mean, I won't do it anymore.
He looked at me with a face like a child making excuses.
It's not about what you will or won't do from now on. Can we trust the words of someone who does such a thing?
Then Chloe approached me with a sweet, coaxing voice, trying to appease me.
Come on, Anthony is saying so, please forgive him. On what grounds are you speaking?
I glared at Chloe with all my might.
After all, you chose Anthony because of his money, even though you were dating Nathan before. I didn't want to lower my standard of living. Thinking about the future, having money is better, right? I can't stand being poor.
At that moment, Nathan stood up.
No matter how much I think about it, I can't leave my child with someone who would abandon her. I'll go to court to gain custody if I have to. It's impossible for someone without money like you. She's my child, and it's too late to say such things now.
Chloe's face suggested she believed she hadn't said anything wrong.
Camila agrees with me, right? She's your precious granddaughter. Don't talk nonsense. Arya would be pitiful if left in your care. Hey, you think it's right to say those things?
Anthony stood up, looking down at me as I remained seated. I decided it was time to enlighten Chloe about Anthony's true situation.
Hey, you. I don't know if you think Anthony has money, but do you know how much he really has?
Chloe responded with a stunned face.
But he's a manager at a famous company. A manager at a famous company? In reality, he's a subcontractor for a subcontractor of a famous company. Just mentioning the name of a famous company, and you didn't realize?
Chloe looked shocked, but I continued without concern.
Moreover, what Anthony has is mostly debt. That too, from spending on games. Before marrying you, he was so desperate over game debts that he came crying to me, and I had to pay them off.
Anthony's face turned red with anger, having his undesirable past dug up.
Hey, why bring that up now? It's irrelevant. Irrelevant? Maybe it is. But I'm done being manipulated by you two, and it's clear what should be done for Arya's sake. You can't be serious. Tearing apart a child and her mother is the lowest. That's unthinkable.
Chloe, shaking, glared at the floor.
Tearing apart? Aren't you the one who did that by treating her like an abandoned child for a year without permission? You have no right to say anything now.
There's nothing more for me to say here, and if you keep this up, we'll end up settling this in court.
Go ahead and take it to court. The court will favor the mother. Actually, you should pay child support. Let's say, I'll settle for $2,000 a month.
Chloe's attitude suggested she was making a concession. Deciding further discussion was futile, Nathan left the negotiation table. Eventually, the custody battle went to court, and Nathan was awarded custody of AITA. Following that, Chloe and Anthony fought daily and ended up divorcing. Even after the divorce, they continued blaming each other, citing lack of money, with no end in sight. Anthony continued pretending to work at a well-paying company, while Chloe, aware of the real parentage yet choosing to conceal it, got what she deserved. A few months after Chloe and Anthony's divorce, working as usual, I thought I saw a familiar figure in the sales area. I hoped I was mistaken, but as the figure approached, my suspicion turned to certainty.
Well, Camila. Long time no see. I just wanted to see your face, so I dropped by.
She approached with a sly smile. The place I'm currently working at features trendy items often highlighted in magazines.
Oh, this wallet is lovely. Oh, wait. This is...
The moment Chloe turned her back to pick up the wallet, she turned around with an expression of feigned shock.
Oh dear, there's a scratch on the wallet behind you. You were rearranging the shelves earlier, right? Maybe you scratched it then?
She pressed the wallet into my hands with a sly grin.
It's okay. If you pay for it, I'll forgive you. But this design is a bit too flashy for you, so I don't mind taking it off your hands.
I knew she was shameless, but her actions were too low.
Oh dear, a scratch on the merchandise. Let me check that for you.
While she pretended to accidentally scratch the merchandise and tried to make me pay for it under the guise of compensation, I called security to check the surveillance cameras. The current surveillance technology is excellent, capturing Chloe secretly scratching the wallet's charm with a concealed sharp object. With Chloe's suspicious actions recorded, there was no room for her to deny it. Let's have a detailed conversation over here. Further investigation by the store revealed that Chloe had been engaging in similar nuisance behaviors sporadically. She was finally banned from the store and handed over to the police for her malicious actions, spending some time under police care. I haven't been in contact with Anthony, as I can no longer handle his issues. As an adult, he should take care of his own problems. While I regret having indulged them, it's time they realized their responsibilities on their own. I hear nothing good about Anthony from his acquaintances and colleagues. Stories of dine and dashes or pretending to collect donations only to run off with the money. Anthony, with his high pride, fails to recognize how much trouble he causes for others. Or perhaps he can't. If he ever seeks help out of desperation, I'm likely the first he'd turn to. Considering this, I decided to move without telling him my new address. It was timely since living in my previous apartment had become uncomfortable. Since moving to my new home, I've been enjoying fulfilling days. There's a gym nearby, and I make sure to get in a little exercise every day. Sweating lightly from the exercise feels great, almost like I'm rejuvenating. It turns out Nathan lives nearby, and after running into him at the local supermarket, we've become like friends who occasionally chat. Arya, whom I used to care for, has grown a lot and now runs around the park. Though Arya and I don't share a direct blood relation, I changed her diapers and looked after her, fostering a connection. I'm happy to still be able to watch her grow. 4 a.m., the faint morning light is coming through the curtains. In my hazy state of consciousness, I noticed my husband, Brian, getting up from bed and leaving the room. I could faintly hear the sound of a newspaper delivery person riding their bike somewhere far away. In the gaps between those sounds, I heard my husband, Brian, quietly going upstairs. What, Brian? Why is he going upstairs? Upstairs, there's only the room where Brian and I store our clothes and our high school-aged granddaughter Emma's room. At that moment, I was still half asleep, and I thought, oh, Brian must be getting up to use the bathroom like he usually does at night. So I didn't think much of it and fell back asleep. The next moment I regained consciousness, my alarm clock by the bed was ringing loudly. It was a usual morning, a typical Sunday. Today, I had a day off from work, so I started doing household chores in the morning. Brian came out of the bedroom, changed into his running clothes, and began doing some light stretches at the corner of the living room.
Hey, weren't you up pretty early? Huh? Oh, yeah, I woke up in the middle of the night to use the bathroom.
After that, didn't you go to Emma's room? It was around 4 a.m., right? He didn't look at my face. After finishing his waist stretches, he quickly left the house. Emma came down from the second floor as he was leaving. Her bangs had grown down to her eyes, hiding them, but the dark circles under her eyes were noticeable. Good morning. Hey, did Brian come to your room this morning?
Huh? Yeah, I'm sorry.
Why is she apologizing? Emma sat down on a chair, hunched over, staring at the empty table. She seemed tired. Sensing the atmosphere that I shouldn't talk to her, I silently handed her a cup of tea. Then I went to the bathroom and started checking the laundry in the basket for the day, piece by piece. My routine. If there's a tissue left in a pocket, it would be a disaster. But the moment I picked up Emma's pajamas, I froze.
What is this?
My name is Sophia. I live with my husband, Brian, and our granddaughter, Emma, who is the child of our deceased son and his wife. Brian and I are both tutors, and we met at work. Brian used to tell me how he struggled with his studies when we first met. He passionately talked about how he didn't want his students to repeat his mistakes, so he dedicated himself to teaching them. I don't care if I'm disliked. The strong spirit that comes from strict guidance will surely help them in society. He often shouted at students. He would make them stay after school until they solved their problems. If they forgot to submit their homework, he would scold them loudly. In my younger days, I thought he was a wonderful person who cared deeply about his students. But that was 14 years ago. A parent of one of his students filed a complaint about his teaching methods. The principal called him into his office and told him that his teaching was excessive. In the end, Brian was forced to quit his job without being able to defend himself. He tried to find another job, but no place recognized his talents. At that time, Brian was 54 years old. He didn't have the courage to try a different type of job. Eventually, Brian stopped looking for a job and stayed at home. I couldn't blame him, I just wanted to support him. It was very painful to see him sitting on the sofa with a very dark expression, just staring at the wall. But we need to earn a living to survive. As Brian started to sink into depression, I decided to start working as a tutor again to support our household. On the other hand, what saved him from his gloom was the presence of our granddaughter, Emma. 10 years ago, our son and his wife died in an unfortunate accident. Emma, who was only 4 years old at the time, couldn't understand that her parents were gone and cried almost every night. I didn't know what words to say, so I chose to spend sleepless nights with her. On quiet nights, the two of us would look at a butterfly encyclopedia. Emma loved the butterfly encyclopedia and would stare at it desperately while her tears fell onto its pages. A memory that never leaves my mind. There are so many different butterflies. They're beautiful, aren't they? At that time, I couldn't think of any other way to distract Emma from her sadness and pain. then to look at the butterfly encyclopedia together. After taking in the left behind Emma, perhaps due to the emotional scars of losing her parents, she often couldn't attend school. You don't have to go to school if you don't want to. I'll teach you everything you need to know. Brian probably said it lightly at first. From elementary school to middle school, whenever Emma couldn't go to school, Brian would teach her. Emma was a quiet, reserved girl. She was obedient and straightforward. The simultaneous death of our son and his wife was truly a tragic event. However, I believe Emma has become a new purpose in life for Brian. When I would come home from work at night, the living room was always empty. If I approached Emma's room upstairs quietly, I would hear Brian's voice giving steady guidance in a low tone. All right, this problem here, it's an application of this equation. I couldn't see Brian's face through the door, but from the tone of his voice, I could tell he was lively. I started preparing dinner. The kitchen was always clean. Thanks to Brian, who cleaned the entire house. I took out the frying pan and started cooking. As the enticing aroma of food filled the room, Brian would come down with Emma. He always had a motivated expression, which reassured me deeply. Sophia, listen. Emma has a great memory and understanding. She could definitely become a scholar in the future.
That's amazing, Emma. You're doing so well.
Emma, with her slightly long bangs covering her eyes, would lower her head a bit shyly. I believed that these happy days would continue forever. When Emma reached the 10th grade, the atmosphere in our house gradually changed.
If you can't even solve a problem like this, you'll definitely fail the entrance exams.
I could hear the loud shouting from Brian even downstairs in the living room. Brian was tutoring Emma in her room. Although Emma, now a high school student, was still quiet and introverted, she was attending school regularly. She attended a well-known local high school and her grades were good, so both Brian and I had high hopes for her future.
No! That's not it! Look at the problem more carefully.
Feeling a bit worried, I went upstairs and knocked on Emma's room door. It was Brian, not Emma, who opened the door and said, "What is it? What's wrong?" I hesitantly entered the room. When the door opened, I saw Emma's hunched figure close to her notebook. Her back seemed to be radiating exhaustion. How about taking a break? So I suggested. Brian, after a moment of hesitation, told Emma to take a break, and we all went down to the living room. I had prepared Emma's favorite cake in the living room. The coffee was already made, and as soon as Brian sat down, he started drinking it. He let out a sigh that seemed a bit exaggerated.
10th grade, this is a crucial time, Emma. When you're young, you can push your body a bit. If you study hard now and get into a top university, you'll have a bright future ahead of you.
I quietly sipped my coffee. A bright future, huh? I didn't think Brian was wrong. But when I thought about the feelings behind his passionate words, it made me a bit sad. Brian didn't graduate from college. I knew he felt insecure about that. Even when he was a tutor, he always said he had the lowest academic background among the teachers. He didn't want our precious granddaughter Emma to experience the same humiliation. That feeling was something only I understood. His guidance was strict. Even though I wasn't directly involved, I knew it. With the exams coming up, I didn't think to stop him. The most important time to study is now. So let's give it your all, Emma. Emma just looked down and didn't react at all. She didn't even touch the cake she usually loved, clenching her hands under the table. I noticed her biting her lip. Emma, what's wrong? Nothing, Emma said in a slightly hoarse voice. Emma had always been introverted and had a hard time expressing her feelings. After eating half of the cake, she said she'd save the rest for later and put it in the fridge. She poured herself a cup of tea and started heading back to her room upstairs when Brian stopped her. "Make sure to solve up to problem 20 in the workbook. I'll come check in an hour." Emma didn't respond verbally, but nodded slightly to show she understood. She seemed a bit down. Emma had always loved studying since she was little. She used to proudly show off her perfect test scores with a big smile to Brian and me. Maybe she's just tired, I thought, and considered taking her shopping for a change of pace when we had some free time. One night, I woke up when Brian, who was sleeping next to me, got up and quietly opened the door to go out into the hallway. It was 4 a.m., and faint morning light was filtering through the curtains. In my groggy state, I caught a glimpse of Brian's face, which looked eerie. Maybe it was just my imagination. But for some reason, I felt uneasy and forced myself to get up and listen. I heard the sound of the toilet flushing, and I lay back down. So he just went to the bathroom, huh? I could faintly hear the sound of a paper delivery person's motorcycle in the distance. Amidst those sounds, I heard Brian quietly going upstairs. Wait. Brian, why are you going upstairs? Upstairs, there were only the room where we kept our clothes and Emma's room. What could he be doing so early in the morning? As I pondered this with my eyes closed, the next thing I knew, my alarm clock was ringing by my pillow. Instinctively, I reached out to stop the sound. I gently placed the clock back in its place and looked at Brian, who was breathing peacefully next to me. I got up and started preparing breakfast. It was a usual morning, a usual Sunday. Today, I didn't have work and was doing chores from the morning. Brian had a habit of going for a walk in the morning. Brian, who had come out of the bedroom, changed into his running clothes and started stretching at the edge of the living room. I placed the newspaper I had picked up from the mailbox on the table and casually asked Brian, "Hey, weren't you up quite early?"
Huh? Oh. I woke up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom.
Then, you went to Emma's room after that, didn't you? It was around 4 a.m., right? Brian is doing his back stretches without looking at me.
I was just helping her with her studies.
Helping with studies? At 4 a.m.? I found it odd, but Brian finished his stretches and quickly left the house. As he left, Emma came down from upstairs. Her bangs covered her eyes, but I could see dark circles under them. "Hey, you've been studying since early morning? Are you feeling all right?"
Yeah, sorry.
I'm not blaming her, so why is she apologizing? Emma sat down, slouched, staring at the empty table. She looked exhausted. She must have been studying all night and finally took a break. I thought she might not want to be disturbed, so I silently placed a cup of tea in front of her. I then headed to the bathroom and started sorting the laundry, checking each piece one by one. It's an old habit of mine. My late son used to leave tissues in his pockets, and it often ruined the laundry. No one does that anymore, but habits die hard. When I picked up Emma's pajamas, I stopped.
What is this?
There was a faint red stain, like blood, on the sleeve of the polka-dotted pajamas. Turning it inside out, I found more blood on the back. I pondered for a moment before throwing the clothes into the washing machine. We have a balcony on the second floor for drying clothes, but thinking it would be hard to climb the stairs as we get older, we added a wooden deck last year. Now, I can step out of the living room and hang the laundry easily. And the deck's edge is perfect for sitting, where Emma is now seated. Despite the summer heat, Emma quietly sits there, sweating on her neck, gazing at the garden. The garden is a bit wet. Emma must have watered it to cool things down. "Emma, it's hot out here. Why don't you come inside?"
No. I'm waiting.
Waiting? For what? The droplets on the neatly mowed lawn shimmer in the light. Emma doesn't answer my question, and I finish hanging the laundry before sitting next to her, looking at the garden. Emma, I saw blood on your pajamas. What happened? I asked casually. I thought maybe it was just a nosebleed or something. But Emma's expression immediately changed. She looked at me in shock and fear, then hugged herself and started trembling. What? What's wrong? What happened? Seeing her sudden change, I quickly touched her shoulder. Emma grimaced and shook my hand off.
Don't touch me!
I was just confused. After a moment, Emma silently rolled up her t-shirt sleeve.
Wait, is that?
Her shoulder was bruised, turning purple. Showing me that painful bruise, she began to cry. I immediately hugged her and stroked her head. We stayed like that for a while, without seeing each other's faces, until Emma, in a raspy voice, began to talk about how Brian had been coming to her room every morning for the past month. It wasn't just one morning, it was every morning. Brian would bring problem sets he created and wouldn't let her go out until she solved them, scolding her if she didn't. When I was at work, he would force her to study harshly and hit her arms and back if she got answers wrong. I'm the one at fault. I'm sorry. I have to finish the workbook before Grandpa gets home. Emma pulled away from my arm and stood up from the wooden deck, heading back to the room, so I grabbed her arm to stop her. She looked down at me with a frightened expression. I knew Brian was passionate about education. I also knew his teaching style was always intense, pushing the other person to their limits. But I didn't realize he was using physical punishment. I never imagined he would force his own granddaughter to study so harshly that it would leave bruises on her body. Holding Emma's arm, I started to cry. You must have been so scared, so hurt. The thought of what Emma must have been feeling while sitting at that study desk always brought tears to my eyes. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Emma. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I held Emma's hand tightly and apologized to her. The melody of the wall clock announcing the time rang out from the living room. I lifted my face, quickly wiped away my tears, stood up, and holding Emma's hand, I returned to the living room. I took out the case with insurance cards and other items from the bag and closet, looked Emma in the eye, and spoke clearly. Emma, let's go.
Where to?
I don't know, but Brian will be back soon. Let's leave before he gets home. Emma looked down and wrung her hands in front of her stomach. She seemed confused, not knowing what to do. She might have been so scared of Brian's physical punishment that she felt too afraid to escape, too scared even to try. I forced a bright expression and smiled at Emma as best I could. It's okay. I'll protect you no matter what. And so, Emma and I decided to leave the house with only the bare essentials. We took a taxi from the house to the station and transferred trains several times to head to a distant town. We headed to my sister and her husband's house, with Emma still looking down with an anxious expression. I had called ahead and briefly explained the situation before we left. When my sister and her husband learned of the situation, they, usually so calm, showed a different expression and guided Emma to a separate room to calm her down. As soon as Emma was out of sight, my sister and let her anger show and muttered, clenching her fists, that she could never forgive this. And I was deeply grateful that she readily agreed to let us stay as long as we needed. My smartphone rang, and when I looked at the screen, I saw Brian's name. I hesitated a little but decided to answer the call.
Sophia, where did you go? Emma's with you, right? She hasn't even finished the workbook. Where are you taking her?
Brian, do you realize what you've done? I could hear Brian sigh on the other end of the phone, even though I couldn't see his face. He began to insult Emma, calling her stupid and sneering, asking if she had told me he was violent. Guessing we had run to my sister and her husband's place.
Did she say I was violent? Emma said that? Yes. Enough to leave bruises on her shoulders and back. Brian, do you realize what you've done? The one who doesn't understand is you, Sophia. We don't have any children. She is the only one we can rely on in our old age.
I was at a loss for words, unable to grasp what Brian was saying. His argument is as follows. The reason he was violent towards Emma was to get her into a prestigious university and secure a job at a top company. And once she had a stable income, she would take care of them in their old age. He fervently argued that this pain was necessary for her to not only excel academically but also to become mentally strong. I was speechless at his words, which seemed insane.
You hurt Emma for that reason? Brian, this is pointless over the phone. I'm coming over there. I'm taking her back.
With an audible, excited breathing, the call ended. I dropped my shoulders and put my smartphone back in my bag. No matter which mode of transportation I used from my home to my sister and brother-in-law's house, it would take 2 hours. Even if Brian hurried, I felt there was still plenty of time. If you decide to break up, I'll support you. Yeah. I'm going to check on Emma. When Emma was a child, she sometimes stayed at this house during Christmas. There is a guest room, and Emma, without needing to be told, would always choose that room. Turning the corner down the hallway and opening the door, there was a faint smell of damp paper unique to books. Inside, there was a large bookshelf lined with old books. On the lower shelves, next to the complete series that every household had, were various encyclopedias. Emma had fallen asleep by the window, leaning against it with a thick butterfly encyclopedia open. She must have been really tired. For now, I'll let her sleep peacefully. Without saying anything to Emma, I returned to the living room, where and prompted a discussion about what to do next.
I can't forgive him. Hurting Emma, for any reason, it's absolutely unforgivable. No matter what Brian says about remorse or regret, I can't bring myself to forgive him.
My sister and her husband listened to me with serious expressions. Maybe it included some daily complaints. Starting with my dissatisfaction with Brian, who had been unemployed for over 10 years. His extreme educational policies, and my own inability to stop him. I confessed everything in front of my sister and her husband as if I were repenting. After a while, the doorbell rang. And answered it, and Brian, apologizing, handed over a box of cookies. Brian's expression darkened when he noticed me.
Come home, Sophia, he said quickly. I'm going to stay here for a while, and I'm divorcing Brian. What? Is it because I was strict with Emma?
He used the gentle expression strict because my sister and her husband were present. In response, I didn't correct him strongly. But I could never bring myself to forgive him, and I felt such hatred towards Brian that I didn't even want to see his face. He stood silently in the doorway. Looking at his palms, he eventually gave a bitter smile.
Emma doesn't have parents. We are her parents. Not making a child study is a parent's sin. If Emma's grades are bad, there's no one else to blame.
What are you saying?
I don't understand at all. Everything was for Emma. I know Emma hates me. But, Sophia, will you reject me too? Will I be alone again, like back then?
Yes, 14 years ago, he was fired from his tutoring job because just one parent of a student complained. He was depressed and in pain. Emma was the one who saved him from that darkness. Maybe Emma was desperately trying to shine a light on Brian's heart. I looked up and tried to walk towards Brian. At that moment, and grabbed my arm. Her expression was severe and suspicious.
That's enough. We're not talking about being disliked or anything like that. We're focusing on the violence that left bruises. And the others have nothing to do with this, right? This is a family matter, isn't it? You just used Emma for your own desires. No matter what the reason, it doesn't justify hurting Emma.
That is.
If you keep being so persistent, we'll have to deal with it not as family, but as a duty. So be careful.
He couldn't say anything back and fell silent. And her husband are actually both police officers. I don't want Brian to get into trouble with the police by filing a complaint or anything like that. And Brian seemed to be handling things calmly, but they must be really furious inside. As for me, I had already made up my mind to get a divorce. Brian was very reluctant about the divorce, but my sister and her husband persuaded him. My sister's words, suggesting that it would be better for him to agree quietly to the divorce, in exchange for not making Emma's matter public, seemed to have been the deciding factor. Brian reluctantly agreed, divided the assets, and moved out of the house. After that, Brian lived off his pension in an old apartment. I don't know how he envisions his own old age, but I felt a little sad thinking it might end in loneliness. After the divorce, Emma and I chose to return to our old house and live just the two of us. When I reassured Emma that she didn't have to worry about studying for exams, she looked genuinely relieved. However, possibly due to the emotional trauma, she hasn't been sleeping well at night. For now, she is going to counseling, and we'll take our time figuring out what to do next. Whether it's going to college later or getting a job, it's okay. If she doesn't want to do anything, that's fine too. Emma is still young, and it's okay for her to keep searching until she finds an answer. This year, another hot summer has arrived. Emma sat quietly on a cushion placed on the sun-heated wooden deck, looking out at the garden. I watered the various plants surrounding our house with a hose. It's hot, isn't it? Why don't you come inside?
It's okay. I'm waiting here.
I was about to reflexively ask waiting for what, when Emma stood up, her eyes wide open. She quickly put on the sandals nearby and walked toward the garden, looking at the sky. Her heels were sticking out of the worn-out sandals. When did she grow up so much? In Emma's line of sight, 2 black butterflies were fluttering around and then resting on the grass, drinking water. Every summer, the swallowtail butterflies come to drink water. They occasionally come from the forest near our home. As Emma approached the butterflies, they circled around her a few times, and then landed on the ground again to drink the water droplets. Hey, Grandma.
What?
Please, live a long life. I gently embraced her as she stood there. Her frail body made me think I need to feed her more delicious food. Someday, I will leave this house before she does. In such a future, what can I do now to make sure Emma is as little sad as possible? The butterfly book left open on the wooden deck fluttered its pages in the wind. Eventually, the 2 swallowtail butterflies slowly flapped their wings and flew over the fence. Watching the butterflies. It's okay. I'll take care of everything, I whispered softly.